Excellent. Are we at a place where it would be good time to start?
I think so.
Awesome. I just wanted to make sure. I know that Diana and I can hear each other. Just wanted to make sure we were connected with everyone else. So with that, I would like to say good morning, good Monday morning to everyone who's here. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. This is the Department of Children, Youth, and Families Oversight Board meeting on this Monday, September 20th, I do believe. No, we are at the 22nd. Boy, I'm a couple days behind. I want to first start by welcoming a new member of the Oversight Board. And from the board, from co-chairs, from our staff, I want to welcome Judge Sharonda Amamilo, who joined recently as its judicial representative. And we are just absolutely pleased to have her on board. Judge Amamilo currently serves as the Superior Court Judge in Thurston County and brings with her over 20 years of experience in supporting children and families that are served by DCYF. And I know just from my interactions myself with Judge Amamilo that she'll be an incredibly knowledgeable addition and also a collaborative and a dedicated member to this oversight board. So just happy to have her on board and for taking the time not only to apply, but to meet with all of us, and happy to have her here at our first meeting today. We have a busy day today. We have a full agenda. We also have full public comment. So long at a clip, and we are going to follow kind of a tight timeline. So some days are like that, and this is one of those. So first, we're going to have a presentation about access to housing and homelessness services by Dr. Sarah Veely from DCYF's Office of Innovation, Alignment, and Accountability. And she'll be presenting along with Jess Mayrer and Shannon Quinn, both from DCYF, to discuss the draft Oversight Board 2.0 proposal, which each of you should have received in earlier emails and hopefully have had a chance to peruse and are ready to wonder a bit and ask some questions and have some conversation. And then we have a wonderful panel presentation and a discussion that is comprised of licensed caregivers, and that will be facilitated by our own Katie Byron, and really looking forward to that. And then also, besides that, we have an update about what's happening with the Family Separation Rapid Responses team, the work that's happening through DCYF, and we'll be hearing from Lillian Faraz. So today's meeting will have lots of information. Hopefully we'll have time for thoughtful conversation on all the topics that I have shared a bit about. And before we start all of that, I'm going to pass things over to Lisha, who's going to do roll call and also approval of the July 17th meeting minutes, and then will let me know if there's anything I forgot. So good morning, Lisha. I'm passing it off to you.
Good morning, Senator Wilson. You did not forget anything. So for the board member roll call, please unmute yourself and let me know you're present when I call your name. So I'm going to start with Judge Sharonda Amamilo. I'll go back. Anna Armstrong. Representatives.
Thank you so much. This is Judge Sharonda Amamilo. I did not have panelist permission, so it wouldn't let me have a microphone or a camera. So thank you. I'm here.
We are thrilled that you are here. Thank you so much for speaking up. I very much appreciate it.
Yes, and thank you so much, Senator Wilson, for that awesome welcome. I appreciate that.
So next we have Representative Steve Berquist.
Present. Nice to see everybody.
Thanks. Katie Byron.
Present.
Justice Bobby Bridge.
I'm communicating with her right now.
Okay, she is in process in joining. Senator Leonard Christian.
Good morning. This is Senator Leonard Christian. I'm present.
Good morning. Representative Tom Dent. Dr. Ben DeHaan is absent. Dr. Marion Harris.
Present.
Good morning.
Hi.
Pamela Javier, who I believe may be joining late. Okay. Daniel Johnson.
Present.
Good morning. I believe Ruth Kagi.
Present.
Wonderful. My notes were incorrect. I'm so glad you're here. Dr. Diane Levy.
I'm here.
Good morning. Lois Martin. Mary Spruti Garlant, who I believe is going to try to join by phone. April Messenger. And Senator Claire Wilson.
Present.
Wonderful. I'm going to see if we have quorum. Nicholas, could you confirm that we have 9 participants, please? That will help us determine whether or not we can vote on minutes.
Hi, Lisa. This is Mary. I think I was muted before. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Thank you so much for speaking up, and good morning. So next, I'd like the board to consider approval of the July 17, 2025 meeting minutes. Does anyone have any edits or feedback? Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
I submit a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Katie. Is there a motion to second? Thank you so much, Ruth. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Wonderful. All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions?
I abstain because I was not yet on the board.
That makes perfect sense, Judge Amamilo. So with that, the minutes are approved, and I'm going to turn it back over to you, Senator Wilson.
Yes, and I see that Judge
Excuse
Bridge has
me.
joined us.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. I just want to make sure, is there anyone else that's joined us since the earlier roll call? Good morning, Judge Bridge. Glad you could join us. We knew you were coming. All right. Okay, so we've gotten 2 things out of the way and we're heading on. We're going to talk a little bit today, as I said earlier, about access to housing and homelessness services. And I want to thank you, Lisha, for taking us through those 2 pieces of work. And I would like to invite Dr. Sarah Veely, Jess Mayrer, and Shannon Quinn to give a presentation on, again, access to housing and homelessness services. I'll say this is the 4th presentation that DCYF's Office of Innovation, Alignment, and Accountability has made to the board this year. For those that may not have been with us throughout this time, just a recap. March, we focused on racial disproportionality in child welfare. In May, we focused on the education, youth involved in both child welfare and the juvenile rehabilitation system. And in July, we focused on opioid use continuum and what that continuum of care for children, youth, and families is for those that are involved, again, in child welfare and the juvenile rehab system. And really grateful for DCYF's commitment to presenting both data and context, because I think both things are critically important as we look at the situation and the issues that are a challenge to so many people across our state. And also with excellence on, again, topics that are oftentimes difficult to talk about. So for today's presentation, I have heard, Sarah, that you are okay with individuals perhaps asking questions throughout. And so what I'd like to do now is turn it over to the DCYF team. And if folks know where the raise hand function is on the bottom of your Zoom screen, you could use that. And perhaps also we could just have folks unmute and let someone know that they have a quick question if the raised hand function is not working, or I don't see that. So with that, Sarah, I'm gonna let you take it from here and do some introductions for us. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Wilson. Thank you to the Oversight Board for allowing us to be here today. It's been wonderful to have an opportunity to talk about some key issues that are facing the children, youth, and families who come in contact with DCYF. And as we continue to talk about these, we're also talking about issues that are facing children, youth, and families in Washington State as a whole. And so you'll see as we talk about housing and access to housing services, this is not unique to the families in DCYF. And so we talk about the macro and then the micro and focus on the families that we serve. So thank you for letting us talk about these big issues that are not just DCYF issues, but are also statewide issues and have a lot of intersections with other parts of our state and our system. As we've done before, I will kind of give a broad overview of what's happening in this topic area, both across the state and then within DCYF, and I'll have two of my colleagues come speak about some unique programs in our agency that are focused on addressing housing needs and homelessness services. Shannon Quinn and Jess Mayer will be speaking to those two. We also have housing and homeless services for youth releasing from juvenile rehabilitation. We don't have juvenile rehabilitation represented in today's presentation. We do have experts. Our folks are experts broadly, and so know about our JR resources as well too. So if you have questions about JR, we can certainly try to answer the ones we know or bring those back as well too. So I want to note that we do have services for young people exiting JR. They just weren't included in today's panel. All right, so just for context, I want to remind you all, as part of the agency's strategic and racial equity plan, creating successful transitions out of our systems, out of child welfare and out of juvenile rehabilitation is one of the agency's priorities. So ensuring that youth exiting foster care and JR have safe, affordable, and supportive housing plans has been at the core of DCYF since our original strategic and racial equity plan. We'll talk today both about young people releasing from our systems, but also about prevention and primary interventions for our families to keep them out of the system or to support them in the early stages of entry into our systems as well. So while the exit piece has always been a priority of DCYF, we'll talk both about young people exiting our systems, but also more broadly about families who are coming in contact with our systems and prevention as well too. So before we talk too much about homelessness, I think it's important to just call out the complexity of even that word, right? There's various definitions of what it means to be experiencing homelessness. I'm not going to go through both of these in great detail. I'm sure there are experts on here who know far more than I do even about the definitions here. I'll just note that, Bikini-Vinto, which is our education definition of homelessness, is on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we have housing and urban development definition of homelessness. I will say, and my colleagues will present later, depending on which agency you are interacting with, impacts what definition of homelessness is being used. And so it's not a blanket statement that we can use universally and say, this is what it means to be experiencing homelessness. In fact, it varies depending on which definition we're using. I'll also note that with the data that we're using here, we're using administrative data. So most of the data is for families or young people who have accessed services due to the lack of housing or to homelessness needs. There are many people who are experiencing inadequate housing, who are experiencing homelessness by these definitions, who aren't reaching out and accessing these services, so aren't included in administrative data. So I just want folks to make sure that you're understanding that, in fact, this is not the entire universe of families and young people who are experiencing homelessness, but rather the ones that are administrative data, whether it's through our office or other state agencies are picking up. So again, the definitions vary broadly. It can be anywhere from including hotels, like short-term living stays, to obviously living completely unhoused. But there's a wide range depending on the systems, and then eligibility for services can vary depending on which definition that system uses related to being unstably housed or experiencing homelessness. So I say in this slide, why focus on access to housing? I think all of us know that there is a significant lack of access to housing locally, regionally, nationally as well. So I'm not kind of surprising anyone here by saying that access to affordable housing is a crisis that is being experienced by families across Washington state. Just to contextualize it a little bit, this slide is looking at adults in Washington state We see on the left-hand side that in the past 7 years, there's been a 10% increase in adults who are experiencing homelessness in Washington. And again, this increase is adults who are accessing some sort of service for experiencing homelessness. So families, or if a young person's not experiencing services, we don't know that they're experiencing homelessness or they're unhoused or unstably housed. So amongst the folks we are aware of, there's been a 10% increase in the last 7 years of adults. Both of these products are from RDA at DSHS. The one on the right really shows the complexity both of race, ethnicity, as well as rural and urbanity as related to homelessness. I'll note here, it demonstrates pretty clearly racial disproportionality in experiencing homelessness. So for example, you'll see that on the left-hand side, 14% of American Indian, Alaska Native population is experiencing homelessness in this slide. I'm stumbling because I want to make sure I said that right. Yes, of the general population, 14% are American Indian, Alaska Native. They gave a great example right there. Among adults experiencing homelessness in rural counties, 21% are AI/AN. So while American Indian, Alaska Natives make up a very small portion of the Washington state population, they're overrepresented in people experiencing homelessness. The same also is for Black and for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Island populations. This also shows some really interesting intersectionality between race, ethnicity, and urbanity and rural populations as well. And so all this to say that we know that homelessness varies by race, ethnicity, and also varies by the different locations of Washington state. And so as we think about addressing homelessness or lack of access to stable housing, we're also thinking about addressing equity and inequities in our state. So the last 2 slides were about adults. I want to talk a little bit about young people as well too. This is data from the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, with the most recent data being the 23-24 school year. It shows here that in the past decade, the number of young people or students experiencing homelessness is the highest it's been. In fact, it was a 14% increase from the previous school year. So we are seeing a significant number of students, in fact, 48,000 students in the 23-24 school year who are experiencing homelessness. And this is using that McKinney-Vento definition that I showed a few slides previously. Even more concern, again, as we talk about equity and disproportionality, we see that while 4% of all students statewide are experiencing or have experienced homelessness, 7% of American Indian, Alaska Native students have experienced homelessness, 13% of Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander, 8% of Black and African American students, and almost 5% of multiracial young people have experienced homelessness. So there's significant variation by race, ethnicity. Not only are we seeing a major increase in homelessness, but we are seeing that children of color are more likely to be the ones experiencing homelessness. Again, here we're talking about Washington statewide, so this is not specific to DCYF, but the young people who are served by DCYF are part of our Washington state education population. And so this helps us understand the larger population from which DCYF is being pulled. There's been lots of work done, as you all know, around homelessness in Washington state. This comes from the Office of Financial or Department of Commerce's Youth Homelessness Prevention Program. And they really did a nice job of talking about the continuum of homelessness prevention. And so what we were just talking about is the broader population of Washington state. And so if you look at the kind of 5 different levels of prevention that they've identified for youth homelessness, universal prevention is the education, making sure people are aware of. And then primary prevention is supporting families prior to any involvement in systems. And so the populations I was talking about previously, children in our educational system, universal prevention, primary prevention are key opportunities there to prevent those families from experiencing unstable housing or homelessness, as well as from potentially experiencing the child welfare or the juvenile justice system. We then have early secondary prevention, later secondary prevention, and tertiary prevention. Early secondary and later are trying to keep people who are having interactions with our systems from moving any further into the system. And then our tertiary prevention is work that's being done as people exit systems of care, child welfare system, foster care, as well, and juvenile rehabilitation from experiencing homelessness. So you'll see from my 2 colleagues who are going to present today, both examples of secondary prevention of families who are interacting with our systems, who are trying to provide services for, to reduce both moving further into our systems, but also to reduce the experience of being unstably housed or experiencing homelessness. And then also talking about tertiary prevention. So as young people leave our systems, how do we support them on their exit? So I want to make sure we see this continuum, right? The universal and primary are key and critical components of preventing homelessness of young people and families in Washington State. DCYF's role sits within that secondary prevention and that tertiary prevention.
Sarah, can I ask a question and you can tell me whether it's coming? Just curious where the intersection is for the Office of Homeless Youth, which does not sit inside DCYF, and whether these numbers are inclusive of that and kind of what that cross-system sector work is, and then whether any of this work is part of the new 1115 waiver, which includes juvenile as we think about the early secondary prevention. So those would be two quick questions.
Perfect. Well, I'll say this figure right here came from the Office of Homeless Youth. So Office of Homeless Youth has been the one convening and doing a significant portion of this work here. I'm not sure about the connection to the 1115 waiver. I'll pause and see if either of my two colleagues on the call know, and if not, we can get back to an answer later on. Okay.
Thank
I'll
you.
get you for that one. Of
All
course.
right.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Wilson. And I will note this is work that is done much more broadly than DCYF, right? We have interventions within DCYF that we'll talk about, and my colleagues will talk about their intersection with lots of other different agencies, as well as nonprofits and other partners as well. This is work that cannot be done solely by DCYF. A little bit of, as we talk about that primary prevention or early prevention, just want to note that we see amongst children in our child welfare system, inadequate housing is noted as a contributing factor in about 10% of safety assessments. So inadequate housing doesn't necessarily mean housing instability. It may mean other issues with housing. And it does not mean that this is the cause of removals. We're seeing that as safety assessments are occurring, inadequate housing is being identified as one of the risk factors that families are experiencing. So 1 in 10 families have that identified in their safety assessment. We also see from young people who are coming into juvenile rehabilitation over the past few years, we've seen an increase from 10% to 18% of young people reported that they were living transient before they came into the justice system. So clearly young people who are in juvenile rehabilitation have spent time in juvenile detention prior to coming to JR, to DCYF. But when asked where they were living prior to coming into detention or state care, they identified being transient. And so this is a huge increase as well too, an identification that young people have needs prior to entry into our system, an opportunity for us to think about how, as broader kind of systems, not just DCYF, but our broader systems can work on prevention of homelessness and access to housing services. And thinking about how these are risk factors then for families and children entering into our system. We also then talk about tertiary prevention, which is the release from our systems. And so this is looking at young people who are exiting DCYF care and their experiences of homelessness within 12 months after exiting care. You'll see in the top figure, amongst youth exiting foster care, within 12 months, 13% have experienced homelessness. The bottom left-hand side is our juvenile rehabilitation population in the most recent year of analysis by RDA. And again, we partner with RDA because they have access to homeless services. We have access to our populations. And so by matching those two data together, we can see once a young person leaves our system, if they access those homeless services offered by other agencies. They show that almost a quarter of young people exiting juvenile rehabilitation have experienced homelessness within the 12 months after exiting. As you all know, homelessness is a significant risk factor for ongoing criminalized behavior. And so being aware of that and the high risk is really critical.
Sarah, I see that Judge Avamila has a question.
Please, thank you. I was trying to talk and wasn't monitoring the chat. So my apologies if it was in the chat.
All good.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Wilson. Sarah, do those numbers include youth that have accessed the extended foster care and the independent living skills services as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I'll show on the right-hand side, and this is the last of our data slides, and you'll get to really talk to the people who are doing the work. By the right-hand side, you'll see within foster care, we have about 13%, as I mentioned before, in 2022 have experienced homelessness within 12 months of exo care. I think it's really important to notice the decline in that number since 2018. So while 13% is still far too high for young people experiencing homelessness, there's been significant efforts within DCYF, the Office of Homeless Youth, other partners across Washington State to reduce the numbers of young people who are experiencing unstable housing and homelessness after exiting foster care. And we've seen a decline of almost 10% over the past 5 to 6 years. So I just want to highlight that like there are successes in this space, in this really challenging space. There are also successes in reducing the number of children, in this case, young people experiencing homelessness. So again, that was the broad overview. I think the major takeaway is what you all already know, which is homelessness is significant within Washington State. It's also a significant risk factor and a challenge that families are experiencing. DCYF interacts with many of the families who are experiencing these challenges. And my colleagues are going to talk more about some of the services that DCYF and our partners provide to help serve these families. So I'm going to turn it over. Unless there's any questions, I'll pause briefly.
I think we're good.
All right, I'll turn it over to Jess.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and everybody. It's good to see your faces this morning. Happy Monday. My name is Jess Mayrer. I'm the Youth and Family Housing Program Manager here at DCYF. I stepped into the position as of July 1st. So as you may imagine, I've had a learning curve. I'll try to answer your questions and provide an overview. To the best of my ability, I have been with the agency longer than just July, so happy to talk more about that another time. But today I'm here to discuss with you how our child welfare housing program works. And so Sarah provided a wonderful segue in that we are really designing programs to help solve the problems. And I'm aggregating some early data out of our programs right now, and it looks like we've served in the neighborhood of more than 400 youth this past fiscal year for our foster care housing program. And roughly 500 families through our child welfare housing program. So we are really working to make a dent. But before I get into the weeds here with you, I'm going to talk to you about just how our program works. And so the way I envision this is we have 3 primary paths to services within the child welfare housing program. And 2 of those paths are really shaped by our partnerships with public housing authorities. As some of you may be aware, we've done some great work forging some great partnerships with public housing authorities in which we can bring new housing vouchers into the state. So those housing vouchers undergird 2 of the primary paths to services within our program. And so the first primary path to services is through the Family Unification Program. And so through FUP, as we call it, we make these partnerships with housing authorities, which open the door to new housing vouchers, which we work to facilitate with contracted service providers, the recipient of those vouchers to families in the instance of the Family Unification Program. And those families are determined to be eligible within the FUP program. We determine if they have, if housing is a primary barrier to reunification or if housing is a primary issue with regard to removal. So that primary language comes from HUD, and we won't talk about that too much, but sometimes interpreting that primary language can be interesting for our staff. The second primary route to services through our program is through the Foster Youth to Independence program. So it's similar to FUP in that we work with housing authorities. We create these memorandums of understanding, which help to pave the way to bringing new housing vouchers into the state. And then we work with contracted service providers to get these services to youth who are between the ages of 18 to 24 years old and who were dependent earlier in their lives. And so those are 2 primary paths. And with those 2 primary paths, we also offer housing supportive services. As you're probably very well aware, we've been allocated $4+ million this year to provide supportive services around those vouchers. So we hopefully increase the stability and the sustainability of the housing by having some case management around housing. How do you identify a place to live? How do you negotiate with renters? Things like that. And so those are the 2 primary paths before the third primary path, which is kind of a newer one for us, which is just simply through the Child Welfare Housing Program. So again, pointing to that $4+ million that the legislature has allocated to our program this fiscal year. What does it look like just to provide maybe one-time rental assistance to a family who just needs first, last, and deposit or something, as opposed to wrapping it in a voucher? And that's relevant because we do see some rockiness at the federal level, and we've seen some vouchers not available in certain regions in the state, and just uncertainty around the federal budget has made it so we want to, in some instances, separate from the vouchers so we can just help families just get what they need, right? So kind of triaging. And so that's an overview of our program, but I'll just pause for a second before I talk a little bit more about what we do. Any questions coming up or thoughts? Okay, we can move to the next slide, please. Yeah. So I noted supportive housing services. And so for all three pathways to services, essentially, we can provide these supportive housing services, which is cash assistance for application fees, first and last month's rent, security and utility deposits, arrears, things like that, moving expenses, other household related costs, noting we can also provide cribs in some instances. You know, sometimes families, you know, a mom with a kid, maybe she only has a garbage bag full of stuff, right? So thinking about just household items, you know, furniture, kitchen goods and things like that, we can provide those in some instances. So that's basically what we're all about in a nutshell. And moving on to talk about some timely things that are happening here for us. We have been directed by House Bill 1177 to engage in rulemaking, which is basically just articulating the way we've been doing our work and how we hope to do our work in the future. So we have an internal draft of that rule, and we've been working with our rules and policies people to begin planning on how we will engage with folks externally. I will tell you, I've been working quite a bit with the Office of Tribal Relations with DCYF because we really want to get out ahead of this with them. And so scheduling with them some engagement sessions with our sovereign tribal government partners. So planning some of those engagement opportunities. If you'd like to hear more about that, happy to talk with you after this. My email's at the end of this presentation. And also with regard to the rulemaking, we will be talking about some additional waitlist funds too as we have these conversations. So stopping for a second, we have the rulemaking, which is one very timely part of what we're up to this fiscal year per 1177. And then also per House Bill 1177, which we discuss on the next slide, please. Also, per that legislation, we've been allocated an additional $500,000 in resource to address our wait lists. And so we have wait lists in various parts of the state, most notably in King County, where I would estimate that our wait list for services is about maybe 100 families long for the child welfare housing program. You know, we're looking at 6-7 months for services right there just for a voucher in Region 4, for example. So we'll be convening these regional work groups to figure out how we want to get at the wait lists, right? Is it through the first path, you know, the FUP path, or is it through maybe the third path, just through the child welfare family housing program, where we get people some financial assistance to get out of the gate, and then maybe they don't need a FUP voucher, right? So really working to design solutions in the regions with the people who are doing the work. So for example, the regional service providers, our child welfare housing leads, the liaisons, which we have in our program, we have child welfare housing liaisons, you know, hopefully somebody from our Office of Tribal Relations kind of thing, but working in those regions to figure out how to get at the wait lists. And so that's the primary plan. We'll be convening those here in the next, hopefully in October, that's my goal. And then some other stuff just to think about for your perspective is, and it relates to the wait lists too, we hear a lot about geographic justice in our work, you know, so for example, it might be easier to get a voucher in, well, I'm trying to think of a region, maybe Region 3, you know, it could be easier to get a FUP voucher, but there are no FUP vouchers in Region 1 or 2, right? So noting that we have different service providers in different regions. So for example,
Jess, could you tell us where those regions are, just so that we have geography? Region means something to you, but if you were to say Region 3, is that, where is that? Just for an example, when you talk about geographic justice, I'd love to know.
Absolutely. So maybe, Sarah, can you pull up a regional map for us, if you don't mind? But broadly, regions 1 and 2 are in the eastern part of the state.
Okay.
And then Region 4, for example, is King County. 5 is let's see, 5 is Pierce County, and then 6 is like a lot of other stuff east
Yeah.
of Pierce County, right? So pulling up that map Shannon's got, and I can I'm not sure if I
No,
can.
thank you. That's just for me, when you do that, I'm thinking, okay,
I'm
I'm a
sorry,
visual
yeah.
person. No, 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 no. All good. All good. Thanks.
Not everybody speaks DCYF speak, and I have to catch myself sometimes. I appreciate that, Senator Wilson. Thank you. But just recognizing that geographically, we do have differences because we have different service providers and they do their work differently. And so as we move into full implementation here, well, let's take a look at this if you want to pull it up. So Pierce, you can see, is kind of that little green dot in the middle with Kitsap. Region 5 is Kitsap and Pierce, and then Region 4 is fairly local, but it's a lot of people in King. And then if you look over to Region 6, it's that whole like western part of the state. And so as we think about geographic differences, again, we're going to have different needs in each region. We're going to have, again, different service providers, different types of wait lists. And frankly, they've been doing things differently because we're moving into full implementation now. And as we do that, we're really working to kind of streamline our processes across the state to better ensure predictability. You know, you're going to get the same answer in Region 1 as you will in Region 6 kind of thing to eligibility, the same types of services. But I'll stop now because I recognize that we have finite time and I see a hand up.
I see Rep. Dent has his hand up.
Thank you, Senator. That was a bit of an accident. I'm sorry. I put it back
Oh.
down.
No accident. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, so just thinking, you know, so I was talking about some of our challenges, you know, geographic justice among them, wait lists, right? One thing is I moved over from early learning, just personally, anecdotally. I'm not accustomed to not finishing things. And with this work, it's really not done, you know? I mean, every time I open up the Region 4 inbox, there are many, many more referrals, right? So just recognizing that there's a huge amount of need, and it's challenging to address those wait lists in light of the finite amount of resources, particularly at the federal level right now. We're seeing shortages of vouchers with the family unification program. And process, just noting that with full implementation, we're really working to streamline our processes. So with that said, our next steps as we move into full implementation this fiscal year, my goals are really articulated. I kind of alluded to this. I really want to unify our statewide processes, right? We're working on a desk manual to further that, you know, trying to get some streamlined processes, workflow, et cetera. Formalize our statewide referral forms and referral processes, noting that currently we work with electronic referral forms, which creates a huge volume of email in our inboxes. We are automating those forms and it'll feed just like one centralized wait list, right? So really working to kind of bring us into the modern day with our processes and hopefully streamline our processes too. Continued internal training and work on external partnerships. So that really speaks to streamlining and making our programs more unified across the state. What do we do? Just explaining what we do to our internal staff. Not everybody knows what the Child Welfare Housing Program does, right? And then continued expansion of MOUs with those public housing authorities, which open the door to bringing more supportive housing services, more federally supportive housing services into the state. So those are the things that I'm thinking about quite a bit for this fiscal year, and happy to answer any questions or hear any thoughts you have, recognizing that I have another colleague who's up after me to speak. So thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Any questions for Jess? Lots to think about. Jess, thanks a lot, and let you keep on going. I think Shannon's next, right? Yes.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for having us. We're really pleased to be here to talk about our program as well. So my name is Shannon Quinn. I serve as the Youth and Young Adult Housing Response Team Manager here at DCYF in the PPS division. I always start my presentations about my work going back to the authorizing original legislation. Our guiding star was 6560. And so this gave us the goal of not exiting any young people from systems of care in Washington state into homelessness. And so this really crystallized the work starting back in 2018. There's Also a report that was authored in 2020, which gave a recommendation that there should be a multi-agency response when there are young people at risk of exiting publicly funded systems of care into homelessness. So that report is linked here at the bottom. If we move forward to the next slide, and also in time to 2022 is when House Bill 1905 was passed, and that was the legislation that created my team. And so we are an interagency team that meets regularly to triage complex cases involving young people exiting systems of care who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness. I know that there's a copy of these slides, and so these links are live. Our publication, our brochure is available. Our website is available for further review after or even during this presentation if you'd like. We can go on to the next slide. So we're a multi-agency partnership. So I obviously work here at DCYF. I have a colleague, Jed Palander, who works in the JR division, and so he represents that body of work. We also have partners at DSHS, specifically within the Developmental Disabilities Community Services, which is part of the new HCLA. It's been reorganized recently, but they're wonderful partners. We have also folks from the Healthcare Authority, both in DBHR, the Division of Behavioral Health Recovery, as well as in Medicaid Programs Division. And of course, our partners at the Department of Commerce, who are out of the Office of Homeless Youth. So we have 8 core team members who are working statewide, and we as a team respond to referrals that come to our inbox from all across the state of Washington for young people who meet our eligibility criteria, which I believe is our next slide, I think. Yep. So we accept referrals for young people who are 12 through 24 years old, who are exiting a publicly funded system of care as defined in statute and are experiencing or at risk for homelessness. I want to note here that the 12 through 24 age range and population is really 2 distinct groups of young people, right? If you think about it, young people who are under the age of 18 predominantly can't access what you think of as true housing on their own, right? Because they need an adult, they need a caregiver, they need somebody who's looking after them and taking care of them, making sure that their needs are being met in most circumstances. There's a couple programs that allow them to access some housing without a parent or guardian. But for the most part, when we think of young people 12 through 17 years old, we're thinking about how do we house them with somebody who's taking care of them. For our 18 and over population, we can think differently about their housing solution and think about independent living, getting an apartment, getting into some sort of shared housing with roommates, those kind of situations. But they really are 2 distinct populations in my experience. I also want to note for exiting a system of care that we only are working with young people who are physically housed by those systems of care. So although the child welfare system interacts with lots and lots of families, a very small subset of those families and those children are actually housed by that system of care, right? Actually enter foster care and are part of that population of young people that we serve. Similarly to the behavioral health system, lots and lots of young people access the behavioral health system through outpatient services or intensive outpatient services, but only those young people who are physically housed in a behavioral health system. Those are the ones that our team is really focused on and serving. What do we provide as a team? So again, there's only 8 of us. We serve the whole state of Washington and young people coming out of these different systems of care. And so we are all headquarters level program managers. And so we are able to provide consultation with service providers, young people and families about the programs that our various agencies offer, things that we can navigate them to. So we can do resource navigation. We also sometimes divert referrals to our team to other teams. So y'all are familiar with the 1580 team, and sometimes that's the more appropriate team, or sometimes Kids Mental Health Washington is the more appropriate team. So we will divert referrals as appropriate sometimes as well. We also recognize that sometimes connecting somebody to a resource is not sufficient. And for some really tricky cases, we have youth-centered meetings. So we bring together our whole team, that young person, and the supports that are around that young person as identified by them. And we hold team meetings based on what that young person's goals are, their needs, the barriers that they're facing. And we sometimes have meetings every 2 weeks or every week for quite a while until we can come up with a solution. Some cases are harder than others, and some challenges are more difficult to untangle. And so we do those youth-centered meetings for some of our most challenging situations. We're also advocating at a system level. We, as you know, Senator Wilson, right? You know that we issue an annual report to the legislature, and we make recommendations for systemic changes that could better serve our young people that are exiting publicly funded systems of care. And so whenever we talk with young people, and especially families who are in challenging, just really hard situations, they often find sort of that beacon of hope in knowing that there are recommendations going to the legislature, recommendations going to people who can act on the needs that exist in our communities and make a difference. And so we think that that's a really valuable piece of our work. Go on. Some of the things that we don't provide, sadly, and I have to unfortunately say this to folks all the time, that I don't have, a list of apartments that I can just put people right into. I don't have open available housing that people can just pop right into. My team also doesn't have direct financial assistance. We have zero budget. All of the work that we do is just based on the work that the FTEs can produce throughout each week. We spend many, many hours together every week working on hard things, making phone calls, researching information, escalating things when necessary and appropriate, but we don't have any actual dollars within our team. We have to leverage existing resources. And so in a way that puts us on par with other folks who are out there in communities trying to house young people. We're working with the same set of resources they are. We have no special privileges, no special resources. And so we see exactly how difficult it is for other folks out there in communities doing this work. Also, we think it's important to call out that we don't do placement coordination. And when I say the word placement, I'm really thinking about inside of the foster care system. We don't do placement coordination. There's lots and lots of really well-skilled folks who are in the child welfare system doing that work, but that's not our piece of work. We also are not an emergency service. I have had folks ask if we have a 1-800 number, and I say, oh no, I don't. I just have my own one personal work cell phone, and you can call me, but we're not an emergency service. I don't have a 1-800 hotline that is covered by a team of people, unfortunately. So we are limited in emergency situations. The most immediate resource I can often give folks is a shelter, a youth shelter or a young adult shelter. So we have limited ability to solve problems in an emergent kind of a way. Go to the next slide. Just briefly talking about gaps in the housing array for minors. So there are virtually no options for long-term housing options for homeless youth who are under the age of 16. We know that our transitional living programs that are funded through the Office of Homeless Youth are available to 16 and 17-year-olds. Of course, there's only 21 of those beds funded by the state across the state. And so there's a very limited access to those TLP beds. But for our young people who are under the age of 16, they're not even eligible for those TLP beds. They're not eligible for things like Job Corps. And so we have very limited options for those folks. And then we also have very limited to no options for young people who have a history of problematic sexualized behavior. Most of our CRCs, Hope Centers, the TLP beds won't take these young folks. They have concerns about their ability to manage safety in their milieu. And so when we have a young person who's exiting a juvenile detention center or JR or coming out of a behavioral health setting like an out-of-state behavioral health facility or a CLIP bed, and we need housing for a young person with this type of a history, it's incredibly difficult. We don't have any dedicated resources for this population. It's a very small population, but for those individuals who are in that situation, it really is quite a crisis because we don't have any dedicated resources to house them. We also have only one dedicated housing resource for young people who are pregnant and parenting. Well, teens specifically, if you're under the age of 18, right? So again, if you're 18 and over, the resources are a little bit better. But if you're under the age of 18, we just have Alexandria House in Spokane. It's the only available option.
Shannon, how has that changed over the last 10 years? And if we look at housing, the options, is that because of a funding issue? Is that because an issue of stock? Have we seen programs close? What's kind of the landscape of what we're seeing? And also, what are we seeing? Are we seeing an increase in numbers related to pregnant and parenting adolescents and young people having children?
Those are good questions. And I think there's a couple of different questions in there. So I'm going to try to answer them as I heard them. And then you tell me if I missed anything. I don't know about the data in terms of the number of pregnant and parenting teens. I would maybe ask if Sarah could help me find some research and we could look and see what those numbers look like. I'm not 100% sure. I just know that when those cases have come up and have come to my attention, I have tried to look around, and Alexandria House is the only resource that we've been able to find for those who are under the age of 18. We have seen the closure of the Spokane CRC this year. On the flip side, we did see the opening of a youth shelter down in Longview last fall. And so I don't know if there's a net loss necessarily within the youth homeless services, but what I can tell you is that the existing CRCs and Hope Centers are almost always at capacity. When you have a young person who's exiting a system of care, you almost always have to call 5 or 6 different places. Young people are constantly leaving their communities to go find a shelter bed wherever it's available. Young people are also shelter hopping to access the resource that they need because the shelter bed stays are short, right? They're up to 90 days.
Yeah, yeah. I would be very interested in the pregnant and parenting teens because what I do know is many of our young people that are currently in Echo Glen and Green Hill and in our JR system are parents. And so I'm just curious, and in my past history, working with 11 to 21-year-old pregnant and parenting teens, always a concern, especially if we're seeing lack of services and supports or increase in change in numbers. So just really curious about that. Thanks so much. And I would love some, follow up later on. I know I do not expect folks to have that kind of thing in their back pocket. So thanks, Shannon.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to follow up. Any other questions? I'll pause. Okay. Oh, looks like we have a question.
Yeah, Dr. Levy.
Yes, I actually had a question about how challenging it may be for you to help youth who may have a intellectual or developmental disability who are also in the system. I just know sometimes finding beds for those kids in general is tough, but I'm wondering about the intersections between that and homelessness. And you said you work with DSHS. I wondered what you had going there.
Yes, absolutely. So on the one hand, it is a tricky population, but on the other hand, we have a whole agency, a whole dedicated set of resources for that population. So what we find most often is the challenge for young people who have an intellectual or developmental disability is that the resource is not quickly available at the moment when they need it, right? So we may have a young person who's being released sometimes from, it kind of breaks my heart really that they're often in a detention center or even in JR, right? And we know that they have this disability and they're being released. And so then we know that we're looking at a DDCS resource. And so for the population of under the age of 18, sometimes we're looking at out-of-home services if we need that residential option, if their needs rise to that level. So OHS out-of-home services is available. But it's not readily available. You can't just say, oh, they're releasing in 2 weeks. I need this resource now. And then you just pop them into an available home. It doesn't really work that way, right? Our DDCS partners are amazing and we ask for escalations and they do. They escalate things. They do assessments more quickly than normal. They have a tremendous ability to help serve these young folks, but what they don't have is the ability to do it as fast as we need it to happen. So I think that that's the biggest challenge. When we think about our 18 and over population of individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities, sometimes we run into an issue of they don't always want to accept services and they have a vision for themselves. Their personal goal is to live independently. They say, hey, I have this friend or this buddy. I want to live with them in an apartment. I want to get a little job and I just want to live my life, right? And we say, that's a wonderful goal. And we love that goal for you. And do you have a job? Have you started applying for jobs? Like, what does that look like for you, right? And the cost of housing in most communities, even if you had a job at Starbucks or at the local grocery store, you may not be able to actually pay rent at market rate, even in those circumstances. And then you layer on whatever their support needs might look like. So it makes it challenging to navigate. And we really just focus on providing the information about what options are available. So for young folks who have an intellectual or developmental disability, we talk about adult family homes as an option, and it's been a great option for a lot of young folks. In fact, we've had a lot of really big wins with adult family homes, so I want to call that out. Supported living is another great option. Sometimes we can even look into assisted living facilities, depending on the young person's diagnosis and what their needs are, what they're looking for. So yeah, I think that's overall, there's some great options because there's an infrastructure built to support those folks. It just takes a lot more time than we often have available. And then we have to come up with an intermediate solution. Good question. Sometimes also, just while I'm on this tangent, sometimes the challenging piece is young folks whom are system involved and we suspect have a DDCS eligible diagnosis, but we may not have a full evaluation by the right type of provider. There are certain diagnoses that have to be made by an MD versus a psychologist versus, all these different things. And so sometimes getting the evaluation is the hurdle, but once you can get the evaluation done, we partner with the MCO, so the managed care organizations through Medicaid, and sometimes we can get those evaluations done, we can submit the application, and so we can get somebody who has been, technically they should have been eligible for this service probably for many years, but they haven't been accessing those services. If we can get the referral in and get them access to those services, sometimes it's just like a whole new world for them and they can really blossom. So yeah, we love working with our IDD population. Okay. These are a couple of opportunities for improvements, just to kind of get your creative juices going about what could be done in the future. So again, supporting youth with problematic sexualized behaviors is really important to us. Again, we see when you see our report this year, we can't even report on the data because it's so small, right? We have to suppress it because it's a small number of young people. But for those individuals in those situations, we really are at a loss. The systems at large just don't have a solution for them. It's really challenging. So I would encourage thought about how we can better support them. We also, as a team, as the Youth and Young Adult Housing Response Team, we recommend clarifying the legal status of unaccompanied homeless youth and empowering homeless youth who are ages 16 and 17 to open up some additional housing options for them. You'll see it in our report whenever that's published, hopefully very soon. And then improving Washington's post-adoption support infrastructure. We see a large proportion of young people who are referred to our team who are coming out of a system of care, who are, obviously at risk for or experiencing homelessness. That's why they're referred to my team. And they have a history of foster care and adoption. And that for us is so hard. We want to see those forever homes and those forever families really be stable and well supported. And it's become clear to us that there's more support that's needed to keep those situations stable over the course of a young person's lifetime. And so we believe some additional resources to support those adoptive families would be really beneficial. We've linked our report section of our website here. Our 2025 report is not yet published, but will be hopefully soon. And so you can check back there periodically for our updated report, newest report for 2025.
Shannon, can I just ask a question? If you go back to the slide around the clarifying the legal status of unaccompanied homeless youth, that you were at the right one right there. So we've done work related to extended foster care and really thinking about when a child ages out of foster care, making sure they're not aging out into homelessness. But I'm curious if that is then a statutory change when you're thinking about what needs to happen to increase options for that 16 to 17-year-old. Is that a system change? What the legal status? Is there a barrier right now? I'm just curious what the challenge is with the 16 and 17-year-olds, and especially as we think about just what we know about homeless and unaccompanied young people.
Yeah, great question, Senator Wilson. So when we think about our 16 and 17-year-olds, they have the ability through statute, right, through some of these really positive statutory changes that have happened to, for example, self-consent to go into a shelter setting. And so that does help us for a period of time. But there are other things that their parents or their legal guardians still have to consent to. So for example, when we have a 16 or 17-year-old who's eligible to go to Job Corps, but their parent doesn't agree to it, we're stuck, right? Because they don't have the ability to self-consent. So they can end up being stuck in a shelter rather than go to something that's more safe and stable like Job Corps because they don't have the ability to self-consent for that. We also sometimes work with 16 and 17-year-olds who are wonderfully self-sufficient. They have jobs, they're doing well in school, and they really maybe could get a small rental room or a place of their own, but landlords won't rent to them because of the way that the statute is. And I'm not an attorney here, but my understanding is that those contracts that are signed by 16 and 17-year-olds can be sort of undone. They can disaffirm them. And so therefore we see that in practice, really landlords are not renting to 16 and 17-year-olds, even if they have the wherewithal to do the rental. And so we really wonder about what other options could be made available to those young people who are ready for that next step towards independence. There are also pieces around accessing services. We see a lot of challenges with dental care, and when young people, like teenagers, need to get their wisdom teeth removed and they can't do that without their parents' consent because it's not a traditional outpatient type service, it's a surgery, right? So like there's just limitations for what these young folks can self-consent to. And so we wonder about how else can we empower them to meet their needs when they're in these type of situations and they don't have an available parent or caregiver who's looking out for them.
I really appreciate that. I think sometimes it's so helpful to give examples because when you're talking about it all the time, it doesn't necessarily conjure up, I think, a picture or a situation or a challenge that to so many of us is an everyday decision or an everyday thing. So, thank you for letting me. Sometimes I think you think, oh my gosh, she's going to put me on the spot, but really appreciate those. Just giving the examples of what you see every day to help us understand, where the challenges are and what we as a board can help try to figure out how to alleviate to make sure that everyone is successful and gets their needs met. So thanks.
Thank you so much for your advocacy and support, Senator Wilson. We appreciate you.
I'm looking at time. I heard the agenda was very tight, so I'm going to wrap us up. Shannon's slides are available to the group and include their Wednesday drop-in office hours as well too. So an opportunity for you all to be aware of those as well as to share those with your networks of folks who may need those resources as well. Thank you for the opportunity for us to talk about what's happening within DCYF around housing and homeless services. I hope this address some misconceptions you might have about the resources that DCYF does or does not have and our ability to step in when housing services are needed. I also just want to kind of conclude by humanizing these experiences. We talked a lot about the data, a lot about the services, but I hope you all are obviously thinking very much about the young people and the families who on a day-to-day basis are experiencing unstable housing and the impact that has on all of them as well. And that's why we're bringing this topic here to you all, because we are so passionate about how addressing that can help our families and our system ongoing. Thanks for having us today.
Just thanks so much, Sarah and Jess and Shannon, for really your presentation today. Again, speed speaking, and I know it always feels like, but gives us a broad brushstroke, if you will, and some data that we can follow up on. And deepest appreciation for the live links in the PowerPoint so folks can dig in a little deeper, especially those things that are of interest to them. And just really thankful for helping us kind of build a deeper understanding of the work and the challenges that you have every day. And deep appreciation from the board. So thanks for joining us today. And with that, we are on time and we are going to move on to our next conversation. And really interested and excited about the discussion that hopefully is going to come next. And it's really related to the Oversight Board 2.0 proposal. And that is representative of a combined body of work that's been going on with the annual report subcommittee, members of the Juvenile Rehabilitation Outcome Subcommittee, and a group that was the Oversight Board 2.0, and that was Ruth Kagi, Representative Dent, Judge Bobby Bridge, and Ben DeHaan. And they've been working on the draft recommendations, really looking at it as part of a continuous quality improvement effort, which I think is really important for us as a board. So one main goal is to really better operationalize and strengthen, as we've talked about so often in the last number of months, our collaboration between the Department of Children, Youth, and Families and the board so that we are seen as a value add. And that really is something that's critically important, I think, as we look at just the state of children and families across our state and across the nation, especially right now. So Lisha, Dr. Levy, and I are going to kind of lead this portion of the meeting. I'm going to keep my eyes on the screen to make sure if people want to be part of a conversation or discussion, again, unmute yourself or raise your hand, and we'll keep track of that so no one is left off. I'm going to start out just by passing the floor over to Lisha, who's going to really kind of set a frame for us and kick this off. So Lisha, the floor is yours, and I think there's a PowerPoint that Nicholas is going to share.
That is exactly right. We're pulling it up right now. But just wanted to say thank you so much, Senator Wilson. I'm delighted to have an opportunity to kind of kick off our discussion today about this draft DCYF 2.0 proposal. We are going to really kind of focus on the discussion after these slides, again, with Dr. Diane Levy and Senator Wilson as co-chairs. Next slide, please. So the purpose of my kicking us off is really to share the rationale behind the draft Oversight 2.0 proposal, discuss and obtain feedback. It's critically important to recognize that this is a work in progress and it is going to change. So I know that the board has only seen a portion of the board has only seen this proposal for about a week now. So there is absolutely work to do. Also, I want to call your attention to DCYF has seen the proposal, but it has not yet been endorsed by the agency. So they are aware of it, they have copies of it, but not yet endorsed. Next slide, please. So just some background. As Senator Wilson was saying, it's truly the collaboration of 3 board subcommittees. We know that the state is facing very serious financial difficulties. However, the timing for this particular conversation just seems right. That's because we have new DCYF leadership, we have a new governor, and several new board members. We absolutely understand that DCYF is being asked to do more with less. However, we really do want to be a value add for the departments. And then I do want to just highlight as well that we are only suggesting minor changes to the statute. And I will highlight that in the next slide, please. So current monitoring activities. The proposal provides a summary of what the board is legally tasked with, and it helps really ground our discussion in the statute. While the law spells out very specific outcomes for the annual report, there are 18 of them, it also points to broader areas that matter. So for example, like prevention or workforce support for DCYF. So far, the annual report has been the board's main oversight tool. We think we have an opportunity to do more by co-developing an annual or biannual progress report together with DCYF, centered on sharing goals that are already in the statute. Some example areas that are included in the proposal, again, these are just examples, but tracking progress on prevention, supporting the workforce, building a transparent, data-informed culture, and strengthening relationships with providers and caregivers. Next slide, please. So some key discussion points that are called out in the proposal. The first is, as I mentioned, to restructure the annual report. The only statutory change recommended by the 3 board subcommittees really for 2026 in the entire proposal is related to requesting greater flexibility from the legislature regarding the content of the annual report. So we are just requesting more flexibility. Second, we'd like to collaborate with DCYF leadership to create, as I was saying, an annual or biannual progress report, which better reflects our statutory requirements as well as legislative intent in the creation of the Oversight Board. The third discussion point is really creating pathways for discussion and analysis. Really thinking about how do we really maximize effective use of our time and really bringing in stakeholders to really inform the work more so than we've been doing. And finally, we are proposing, again, these are all proposals, to dedicate some OIAA, so Office of Innovation, Alignment, and Accountability, capacity to support this shared accountability practice with philanthropic support. That would really only be possible with private funding through philanthropy. So next slide. I promised this would be short, and indeed it is, because I think the discussion is going to be so very important. I just want to thank you, and I think it would be great to hear from those members of the board who were actively involved in the Blue Ribbon Commission, as well as some newer members. We're certainly interested in getting feedback from everyone. So with that, I believe Dr. Levy is going to start us with a question.
Yes, it's sort of a yes, but so we have, I just want to let everybody know we have until about 10:55 for this discussion, if I've got my time zones correct. And what I wondered if we could maybe ask Representative Cahey Ruth to give us a little bit of her insight, because I know she was on, or actually Representative Den, I believe you were as well. If you have any other background that you would like to share with the group before we start a general discussion.
Well, thank you, Diane, and thank you, especially Lisha. I think you've really led a very constructive conversation about how we can focus the work of the Oversight Board to kind of refresh our work and make sure that our efforts are really a value add, and that we're contributing to the improvement of services for children, youth, and families. I think the initial legislation that created the Oversight Board was overly ambitious, and it was drafted in response to the concerns of many members. So it covered the whole landscape, and I really I do think it's appropriate for the statute to be changed to allow us to really focus on some key elements so that we can dig deep and provide recommendations and insights that are helpful to the legislature and the governor and the department. That obviously, I think this proposal really incorporates that, but it's obviously dependent on the department welcoming this new partnership and being willing to support it in part through the Office of Innovation, Accountability, and Alignment and Accountability, and also the resources of private philanthropy, which I think there's very strong interest in supporting our efforts to really better focus our work and to provide meaningful input to how we can improve services.
Thank you. Representative Den, did you want to also add anything before we start a general discussion?
Sure, thank you, Dr. Levy. You know, I agree with Ruth. And there were a lot of folks. There was a lot of discussion when we created this, and we also knew that when we did this, that we were learning. You know, it was an effort in progress here. So I think that we're trying to improve it a little bit and make us more relative to what's happening. And we want to also, I think, we'd like to hear from our stakeholders in a little bit more progressive fashion. I think that's not the right word. Positive manner, I think, and I think this it's a start. I'm really anxious to hear what the rest of the board members think, and also our other stakeholders to how we can make this better. I mean, there's been a lot of positive around the Oversight Board and a lot of support, but there's been a certain amount of criticism too that we're not maybe extremely effective, and or you know, what is the purpose of it, you know? So I think this is something we need is a work in progress. Let's see how we can improve it and make our Oversight Board work. I mean, it was very important to all of us when we did it, and it's still important to me, and I know it's important to many other folks. So it's I'm anxious to hear what other folks think about this and see where we can go with it. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. I think that really helps to set the stage very nicely. So everyone has had a chance to review the document, and this is a completely open discussion. It can go whatever way you feel, whatever direction you'd like. I think one of the things we would like to be available if there are questions about the process of how this document was created, and also whether you can help us understand if something is resonating with you or if there's something that really challenges you that you feel like we need to kind of push back on. So this is we have almost an hour to discuss. So feel free to raise your hand. We're looking for, or just unmute, but we're looking for some early responses. So anybody want to start us off? Pensive silence. Well, let me ask this then. Is there anything about the document that people have concerns with? Something that they feel is an overreach, or that we're not going too far enough, we're not doing enough? Or is this seem like it's hitting the sweet spot? Because I know that the groups that worked on this document put a lot of time into it, and they really they looked at the statute the way it is currently written, and they want to make some positive changes in the statute that are particularly around the annual report, but they're also very interested in some more operational changes that don't require a statute change. So that's the kind of piece about broadening our discussions and our relationship with the agency itself. So anything that people have concerns about?
I'll just, I have some like initial reactions just as comments, and appreciate Lisha, who has brought me in early, and the collaboration on this so far has been helpful. So just appreciate that. I think restructuring the annual report makes common sense. I think that's like an easy win for folks. So I think fully supportive of that move. I think I'm interested in hearing more from DCYF leadership around kind of how we can collaborate with their priorities. So hopeful that we can kind of identify some areas where we can work together, and that DCYF would find value in that partnership. I think on the OIA capacity, obviously, I think most folks know executive branch in general, DCYF is certainly not immune to this, just in terms of budget resources and their ability to kind of bring more resources to bear. So I would be curious just on what philanthropic support would look like for that, and just having some more detailed conversations. I know OIA right now is pretty strapped in terms of resources. So just curious about, more conversations on that. So anyways, those are some of my comments so far. Appreciate the work that's been done to date, and looking forward to hearing more from DCYF.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate those comments. Anybody else?
I'd like to say, well, maybe Leonard's going to say something, but I'd like to say that, we worked hard on this, and I know it's a little bit of a complicated issue. And if you look at this, it's if there's any questions on why we want to change it, I mean, I'd really like to hear from folks, and because I think we need to really I really like to hammer this out so we move it forward in a positive direction. Hopefully the Oversight Board will become more relevant and stronger. So. And I know that Ruth and I are really good at what we do, but I don't know that we're that good, okay?
All right, Senator Christian, I see your hand.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Good conversation so far. My biggest, I guess, concern is how can we get like an overview of the finances so that we can actually make some good, better recommendations. I mean, in the long run, I think we're spending a lot of money on JR 25, but yet we're not spending as much on keeping folks from getting involved in the system. So where can we get some just 40,000 foot overview letters, or figures of of this is how much is spent on, foster care. This is how much is spent on homelessness. This is on JR 25, in something that's, that can mean something to somebody who might be math challenged like myself, to see these, these big numbers, and where we can make these cuts and make a significant difference on keeping folks from getting involved in the first place, versus spending a bunch of money to hopefully someday get them to change their path while they're in it. So I'd appreciate that. So that I think that in the long run will help this oversight board be able to make better recommendations.
Thank you so much, Senator Christian. I will absolutely reach out for information like that, because I think it's critical. I also want to just echo what you said about prevention. In talking with many board members, that is at the forefront, really that continuum of care, and really starting early on. So just want to appreciate your mention of that as well.
We are going to be discussing the decision package that DCYF has put forward. So that will have some financial pieces. I believe that's on our October meeting agenda. Is that correct, Laisha?
I have not received clarification. It's either October or November, but it is upcoming. Absolutely.
So I think that might give us a little bit of insight into what they're currently going to be asking for. But I think you're looking at an even higher level, which I think it makes total sense. I'm also going to just mention that we have talked to DCYF leadership about this proposal. And one of the things that they're very interested in is looking at the statute for pieces that really we don't do, that were written in, or we can't do. Like they mentioned, the contracting piece that's in the statute is something that we really can't do. It's not in our purview. So they're looking at this opportunity to also clean up the statute a little bit for those pieces that were probably not are erroneous as we sit now. So that should be a good, I think, cooperative discussion with the agency.
I think I see Judge Amamila's got her hand up.
Yes, on that point, I just wonder, I'm sure there was a lot that went into the establishment of that statute and the scope of the authority of the oversight board in the first place. So any questions or desires to have something that reduces the authority of the oversight board would have to be scrutinized extensively, I think, because what it sounds like the board is trying to do is to make a clear, get a clear understanding and representation and put things in place so that they can exercise the authority that the statute gives them. So I'm a bit reserved around the idea of looking for ways to reduce the oversight board's authority that's written in plain language already in the statute this early in the process. So I'd be cautious about that.
I also think it's really talking about how we utilize the expertise that sits within this current board to really support DCYF and the work they're doing, because we all have a role, we have a perspective, we also have an expertise. And I think that's something that I know as co-chairs we've chatted about is, how is it that DCYF looks at members as the experts that they are as they sit on this board. So as they do their work, they look at us as a support in that, and someone they could reach out to gather expertise, but also provide us with the information so we can utilize the expertise to make those good decisions. But it is it's an interesting setup because it's the only agency that has an oversight board set up the way that this does. So we are an anomaly, if you will, compared to other state agencies, which always makes this conversation an interesting one, because there's really nothing else to that's like us, if you will. So and the statute is separate from the oversight board, which is also an interesting thing. The thing that created the DCYF agency is separate than the Oversight Board statute, which is what we're talking about right now as well. So it's an and both, if you will, because they have to stay connected, but they're two separate pieces of legislation. How I always think about things. So anyway, I see Ruth's hand up.
Thank you. I really want to repeat what I started out with, that the language in the law is incorporates the concerns of many members about all aspects of the department. And the department was created because of a lot of concerns about the responsiveness of DSHS to the legislature, our inability to get answers from the department, our real focus on trying to get some transparency and accountability. And so an awful lot was put into the statute that the Oversight Board just does not have the staff capacity to carry out. So I think revising the statute is in large part a recognition of the fact that we have limited resources, and we really want to be able to provide advice to the department, the governor, and the legislature that's valuable and useful. And we're going to have to focus more in order to do that.
Yeah, I'd echo those comments. I think one, just a lot has changed too, since the start of this and since the founding legislation. And so I think in some ways we're recognizing that things have changed and positively for the better, which is great, I think, for all. I think also it's about kind of a strategic usage of time and resources, both for the department and for the board. I think there's probably a lot of information right now that's being collected and gathered and is kind of sitting on a shelf. And so how can we, utilize our resources better and more strategically in order to get at the outcomes that we want? So appreciate your comments and echo those as well.
I would just add that I think I've been on the board now for 5+ years, and it feels to me like we're in the process of moving from a board that basically meets once a month and listens to a board that's becoming much more interactive. I've seen that over the last year with the creation of the subcommittees. People on those subcommittees are very engaged and interested in what we're talking about. I think I've been on the JR subcommittee with Justice Bridge, and it's been really fun to see her expertise at work and bringing in other groups that are also interested in these issues. And, we're learning so much, but we're also interacting with other groups like the Office of Sentencing and the Guidelines. And so that kind of interactive nature, the operational nature of that, a direction I think that's very exciting for the board to be considering going into. So I guess that's one thing. I feel like we've had these smaller groups that have been operating. And then I think if we can spend less time just sort of duplicating what data is already out in DCYF and really kind of moving it to more of maybe a translational piece, if you would. That's a term that I've heard from a philanthropy and from the DCYF leadership. In other words, we have this data. How can we translate that data and make it more user-friendly for the public, but also to ensure the accountability of our job and our mission in oversight? Does that make sense? A little bit.
Rep Dent.
Thank you, Senator. So following up, a little bit, maybe to put this in context, the name of the board is the Oversight Board. And, we've struggled with what the oversight means as well. And we've had, an extraordinary amount of information thrown at us in the last few years. And I think part of this is an attempt to, and that's why we're hoping that the other members can, the board can weigh in on this, is, One is we can get overdone. We can have too much data. We can get buried in data and information overload. And sometimes I think that's what we are, and then we don't really know what's happening with the department. So we're trying to put this, we were looking at how can we frame the oversight board to where we have, the information we need to see where the DCYF, where they're going, what trajectory they're on, and then how we can, we're a step back and we can look at them and decide, are they going where we want them to go? Are they going where they said they want to go? And we all know that if somebody that looks at what we're doing is a step away from what we're doing has a better view of what sometimes than what we do, because we're buried in ourselves, right? And so that's kind of a little bit of what we were kind of looking at, and it's something I've been looking at and talking about for a long time. And have we captured it in this draft? I'm not sure, but I think, what does oversight really look like, and how can we do it? And the other thing we've talked about, this draft talks about, restructure the annual report. I mean, is that all we're about, is an annual report? And I don't think so. I think that these annual reports in all these agencies, we can put out reports and then none of us read them because they're just, it's information overload. So how can we have something that puts together that we actually look at, our stakeholders look at, and then how can we move forward with that information? I think if that frames it a little better, I mean, we've all struggled with this a little bit, but let us. That's where I'm.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, I was trying to keep quiet because I really do want to hear from the rest of these folks, because it's really important that we've got to speak with one voice, and we all have to feel comfortable with what we're doing here. But I just wanted to emphasize what Representative Dent was just talking about. We do need to get ourselves better focused so that we can give better advice, and we do need to have a recognition that we are a set of people who have independent expertise in these areas that can be of great deal of help, individually as well as collectively, to the department. And therefore, this is not necessarily an adversarial relationship, nor should it be. That said, we're not an advisory board or an advisory committee either. And as I think Diane mentioned, it's we're kind of sui generis, as we say in the law. There's nothing else in state government that is like us. And so I think that, I mean, I've been on this board since the beginning, and I think we have struggled with this mightily, although not directly. It just kind of becomes part of the confusion that we ourselves feel about what we can and can't do and shouldn't do, even more importantly. So the exclamation point that I want to add is that there's been a felt need to get ahead of the newspapers and the investigative reporters. We think that we can fill that kind of, frankly, responsibility to our community, as well as to being a good partner to the department. And so that requires us to be more proactively engaged in what's really happening. I think that's what Representative Dent was talking about, the operational side. Not that we're going to fuss with the operation. That's not our job either. So this is the needle to be thread. And we have to be aware of all of these kind of nuances in our relationship. But we are not, I think there is a consensus, or at least has been, on people who have been on this board for a long time, among those people, that we are not as effective as we need to be, or should be. And that's what we're now struggling to find out. What is that pathway, and how do we do it sooner rather than later?
Thank you, Bobby.
Can I throw out a wonder? And my wonder is, part of this is the world has changed a lot since the Oversight Board was first created. And I'm just going to talk about just the virtual nature. Because when the Oversight Board first started, there was no virtual nature of anything. So the only way people interacted was via email, right, or coming together in meetings. And same thing with DCYF or every other agency in the state operated by in person. And the only way you really got interaction with folks was by seeing them. And I'm curious as we think forward about the role, also, one of the things I'm a systems thinker, and one of the things I've been trying to do is make some connections. For example, the JR subcommittee and the DCYF Oversight Board didn't necessarily know that Sentencing Guidelines Commission had a JR subcommittee, which is what Dr. Levy was sharing that Judge Bridge is sitting on. But with the virtual nature, my wonder also is how has that changed perhaps some of the, again, those things inside the statute. So it's about, for me, how also are we strengthening the connections that already now exist that weren't there before? Because I think we're assuming that the landscape is the same as it was. So there are some things that are different and maybe some new ways of making sure that members of this board are part of those groups and those other, what they're full of stakeholders, they're full of advocates, they're full of professionals, and being part of what's already going on and bringing that to the board, I think is also a way to potentially kind of strengthen and change the work we do as the DCYF Oversight Board, if you will. I don't know if that makes sense, but there's a lot of things, and I know Diane and Elisha get really tired of me saying it, but there's all of these groups that are meeting, and for me, it's how do we take the expertise in this room and connect that, and then have us come back and be able to share all that, knowing there are things working outside of this oversight board that would help us do the work we do in partnership with DCYF. So if that's totally confusing, I apologize. But as a systems thinker, always trying to make those connections and figure out how do we strengthen, I call it the weave, and connection from inside out and outside in.
Anybody else? I guess one thing that has struck me when I've read the statute is that we have both a role in monitoring the DCYF's progress towards outcomes, and then we also have the ability to provide advice. And I would say that I don't think we get asked for our advice very often. And I was struck when we had our last JR subcommittee, we had the Office of Sentencing Guidelines presenting. And at the end, she said, I would really love you all to look at some of our recommendations and give us feedback on what you think. And I thought, wow, that's really what I think we should in part be doing here. I mean, we aren't advisory. We've got another arm of this, but it sure would be nice to see a bi-directional flow so that it's not always the agency coming to us and giving us a presentation, but asking us for how we feel about certain issues that are coming up before them. Go ahead,
And I see.
Representative Dent.
Thank you. Diane, maybe this will help a little bit. So when we were working on the legislation, and probably the best definition we had at the time was the Oversight Board will be the 30,000-foot view of where the DCYF is going and what they're doing, you know, and that's kind of, that's what probably the best definition we had at the time. And I don't know that we really got into the weeds a lot farther than that. I mean, obviously within the bill we did, but as far as explaining it and talking with our colleagues, it was, you know, just an oversight from 30,000 foot. And then if they're off track or we see issues, that's when we should, you know, have the ability to say something. And I think that's something we haven't been very good at doing, you know, but we did make it, in the very first meeting the Oversight Board had, there was some discussion about an advisory board, and it was made very clear by those of us on this board that we were not an advisory board, that we were an oversight board. And I think that's something that we want to make sure we keep it in focus. You know, I'm not willing to say we're going to back up and become an advisory board, because we don't need any more of those within DCYF. But if that helps, 30,000 foot is what we talked about, and so we know where they're going, whether it's outcomes or are they on the right track, you know, and does it look like a positive, you know, direction to go? So that's kind of where we were. Thank you.
Representative Dent, just for my own kind of like learning about more of the history, do you guys feel like, or other board members who have been around longer, do you all feel like there have been times at the 30,000 foot level where you were like, hey, it seems like things are going off track, and here's what we did to kind of like get us in a different direction?
You know, I think there's probably some times we looked and thought maybe they were off track. And I think for my personal view, I can't speak for everyone else, but for me, I felt like sometimes we might not have had the information we really needed to know where they were going. And so we weren't exactly sure if they were off track. But, you know, I think we haven't, and this is not meant to be critical of anybody or anything, okay? I just believe that we hadn't refined this enough to know what to ask for. And I think we need to refine what we are so we know what to ask for from the department. Also, you know, we need to remember that DCYF is a brand new agency, and everybody was growing together, okay? So, and it's just, it now has some different leadership, which will, you know, it's going to be different, but also the new leadership formerly was on this board and was a former chair of the Oversight Board. So I think that all these things can help a little bit as we try to refine who we are and where we want to go and the information that we want. I mean, I think what this basically, it's about keeping our kids safe and having a positive, we want good outcomes for our kids. You know, I'm really, really passionate around our foster kids and helping them have a life, and how can we help them do that? So if that helps you a little bit, I hope that helps a little bit.
That does, thank you.
Yeah, well, and I just think if I could add to that too, I think what I was trying to articulate in part in my earlier remarks was a sense of frustration that, you know, we're behind in the news cycle. And, you know, when we as the oversight board learn about what's happening at Green Hill and what the response was for this overcrowding at Green Hill, which had reached such crisis proportions, and not in a day, I might add, over a longer period of time, plans were developed for how to address that, but we didn't know anything about that, even in the presentations that were made. And there was a sense of frustration, like, holy cow, you know, we are chasing the news cycle. And the same thing has happened on the child welfare side as well, having to do with fatalities and other things as the years have gone on. And I think, again, a sense of frustration that you have a group of people here who have been appointed by the governor and who have been approved by the House, the Senate and the House of Representatives, and as having, you know, something other than being potted plants, I guess is the term of art. But you know, just a bit of a frustration, and that it's not a pointing fingers. Lots and lots of stuff to do when there was COVID, for crying out loud. I mean, it's a brand new agency, but I think there was not a sense of partnership, and that maybe, you know, now I'm rolling back to the initial introduction to this discussion, and that is why there needs to be more transparency between the two of us and a better relationship, and therefore we need to maybe make some changes to this statute, and but do it in a collegial way, because that's what's going to be better for the community and the people that we really are serving, which these kids and families. And that's the holy grail, is when their lives and sense of safety and security and ability to not just thrive, not just survive, but thrive, becomes a reality. And that's what we all need and want. End of sermon.
And I just want to put my 2 cents in. I totally agree. I really hate the fact that I find out more about Green Hill and DCYF through the media and reading the papers than I do from official channels. It just always bothers me that, oh, what about this? And I read the article and I'm like, gosh, it'd be nice to know this information since I'm on the board, oversees some of this information. So always shocked that the media seems to be, more advanced than the knowledge than sometimes the board members.
Excellent point.
Yeah, I do have to say, though, the history of the board has been report out, is the agency has come to report. That's it. And so there has not been an and both or both and at all. And so I think that's what we're trying to create, because it's not been there. It has been a place to come and share numbers and to share slides, not to come together to create solutions. I think
100%,
that's
100%.
historically, and that's, I think, our conversation and why this is such an important conversation, because there's no reason and no need for us to come together and to continue to show what we already know. Now it's an opportunity to say, what are we going to do about it? And how do we utilize the expertise from this board to support the vision, the mission, and the goals for kids and families across our state? That's my hope. And it's an interesting thing because we don't stick around either as far as legislators. Things come and go. And so the board would be a place, I think, that also could carry, as we know now, the history and kind of the whole creation and the development as an agency and where they are. So I really am appreciative of the conversation because it's all truth. And, the question is, what are we going to do and how do we move on to create the next iteration? It's one of those continuous quality improvement things, I think, that will lead to better outcomes for us, for better engagement from board members, because people will actually perhaps feel as if their expertise can be utilized and can be heard. And I think that's my hope as well, as we bring folks on, not just to sit and listen and sit and get, but to actually have the conversations around how do we support, and the idea of bringing, whether it's decision packages or potential legislation, I think that's critically important. And that's happening now. And that's something that we can, as a board, also wonder and request from DCYF as they move forward, how we can support them in the creation and the support of their development of whatever might be coming out in this next legislative session. So just really deepest appreciation for the conversation. I see Ruth's hand.
Thank you. Well, I just want to return to the need for us to focus. We have very limited staff. We have limited time as board members. And, I appreciate the concern about wanting to be advised of issues before they come to the fore. And I think that's a real tension, because if we agree to focus on the well-being of the workforce, which we know is critical to the functioning of the department, or on another area where we've identified where we could potentially be valuable. If we focus, we need to focus and not try to deal with every crisis coming out of DCYF, because there are many, many crises having to do with children, youth, and families. So I think, that's the tension we face, of really wanting to address all of the concerns that we bring as members to this board. and the need for us to focus in some areas where we can work with the department to really have an impact.
One question I might have for the group is, how do you view us, the board, in terms of level of independence from DCYF? Because that's something we talk about, sort of the relationship with DCYF and the agency, but we also, to some extent, have to be independent in terms of our process and our, monitoring capabilities, or at least, so in other words, we can't be totally beholden to what they would like us to do, right? So I wonder if that issue has hit any of you, the level of independence you feel this board should have in comparison to the agency.
I think it's important to collaborate with the department. However, this board needs to have some autonomy.
I echo those statements of Dr. Harris, and I'm really listening. I guess I came at a very important juncture where we're having this conversation, because it really matters in the courtroom. What motivates the agency to really strive to meet not only its statutory obligations, but also the strategic outcomes that they publish, because we in the courtroom those are the questions that we're asking. Those are the things that we are expecting. And we don't have much to really statutorily apply to enforce. We have limited ability to enforce under the law. And to the extent that this board has, even from the 30,000-foot reference that Representative Dent spoke of, to the extent that there's a mandate, some mandated language in the statute of what this board can do to help DCYF be as successful as possible, but not necessarily give up any of the tools that the board has to influence the efforts and the prioritizations that go on within the agency about how they're using their resources to meet those objectives. So I'm really, really interested in this part of the process, because I think we do have to have independent ability to do that.
Okay, Representative Dent.
Thank you. So I agree with that. I mean, I think we have to be independent because, we can't have the appearance of being, having a real close relationship with DCYF, because then that looks like we're the good old boys club. And I think that's not what we want to be. I don't think any of us want to be that. I think we want to be independent and take an objective look at what's happening. So, and I would think, listening to the good judge there, that if something comes into the courtroom, we need to have that as well. That we have that look. And will we end up in a courtroom someday? I hope not, but you never know, right? You never know what can happen in the future. So I think it's important that we think about that. And I think that has a little bit to do with the difference between being an advisory board and being an oversight board. An advisory board is engaged and intertwined with the department. And I think we're like I said, we're one step back. So.
Thank you. I'm going to note that we have 2 minutes left. So any last thoughts, or Lisha, do you want to even talk about maybe next steps in the last 2 minutes, just so people know where we're going from here?
Thank you, Dr. Levy. Really appreciate everyone who contributed during this conversation. I also want to just, again, acknowledge the number of people who worked on this proposal. It has been and will continue to be quite an effort, and the level of thought and care and review of the statute has been tremendous. So really want to acknowledge that. Also, I want to let people know that if you were unable to participate in the conversation today. I'd very much appreciate any written feedback by email. We do plan to vote on the 2.0 proposal at our October board meeting. So absolutely, really just want to encourage you to reach out to me, or I will be reaching out to you. And then last, I wanted to clarify for those members of the public who may be listening, after all our board meetings, the materials that are distributed to the board, the PowerPoint presentations are shared on our website. So this information will be available. Thank you. And thanks to everyone who contributed.
All right, we are being quite timely. So here we go. We have one really great presentation coming up, and then we will take a break. And so first, again, just want to thank everyone for the contributions and the conversation that just happened. And for those who were listening intently, I could tell, please do share with Lisha if you have any thoughts that come to mind after the conversation has ensued. So the next step, we have our own Katie Byron, who is our board's foster care representative. And today, Katie's going to facilitate a conversation with 3 licensed caregivers who will answer, I think, 6 or 7 questions that Katie's kind of put together that include conversations around their experiences in navigating the foster care system, as well as supports and systemic barriers that they may have experienced themselves. And I just, on behalf of the board and co-chairs and Elisha and Nicholas, want to thank you for creating the questions, finding the panelists, and then finally facilitating today's discussion. So I want to turn it over to Katie, and I want to let you do some introductions of the panelists, Jack Fitzgerald, Brent Anderson, and Kendra Aguilar. And I know that you'll do some introduction and they can also introduce themselves. So if you want to all come on camera, we are ready for you. And Katie, thanks
All
for doing
right.
this. I'm passing it off to you.
Thank you so much, Senator Wilson, and thank you all for allowing me to be here. And I'm really excited to bring this panel of caregivers to you so that you can better have an understanding of what we're going to go 30,000 all the way down to almost 0. So this is what life is like at 0 as a caregiver in the system. And so what I prepped everybody with was that we're just going to have a conversation, and I have questions to guide the conversation, and we're just going to popcorn in. And so I want to encourage questions as we go if it seems relevant. Feel free to just stop us, join into our conversation. And so with that, I am going to introduce myself. My name is Katie Byron. I have been involved in child welfare in some aspect for over 20 years now, which is hard to believe I've been involved in anything for 20 years, but I have. And I sit on this board with that lens. And so with that, I am going to toss it over to Brent first. We are missing one of our panelists isn't here yet. So we're going to start with just 2. Hopefully the other one will join us. But Brent, could you share a little bit about yourself, your family, and what inspired you to become a licensed caregiver?
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Brent Anderson, and I live in Paulsville, Washington, over on the Kitsap Peninsula. And as the director of Royal Family Kids Camp, which is a 5-day overnight camp for children in foster care, I began training a team of 50 adults to prepare for how to go to our week and best give an experience for children with relational trauma for a week. And my wife and I realized as we're doing the trainings that Kitsap County was 200 homes short of a need for children that were currently placed. And it didn't take much after realizing that and doing a little investigating that we needed to turn our home into a foster home. So we sat down with our 4 biological sons and asked them if they were on board. They said yes. We officially were licensed in November of 2019, and we've had 23 placements since then. We've adopted 1 of those 23. We have contact currently with only 1 of the others. So that's our story.
Well, thank you so much, Brent. How about, well, Brent, actually, I'm gonna go back to you. Can you give us a 2-minute elevator speech of what Royal Kids Camp is for those who don't know?
Yes, I would love that. Thank you. So Royal Family Kids Camp was created back in 1985 in California as a specific ministry just to focus on children in foster care, to give them just a week of being a child, having that week-long outdoor experience with, adults who are going to love on them for the week. Yeah, and in Paulsville, we've been around since 1993. So we just finished our 33rd year of camp this last summer. Yeah, it's just an incredible, opportunity for the kids to come to camp and just have fun. There's a lot of firsts for kids at camp, and a lot of, I think, maybe awarenesses of, oh, this is possible. Like I can do this. I can have fun with an adult in my life, and this is good. This is a good time. So we're right on the water, the Puget Sound. For our specific camp, every camp is different. And the kids just have a blast there. Our target age group is elementary kids, so ages 6 to 11. Beyond that, there's a program called Track Teen Reach Adventure Camp, but our focus is for kids ages 6 to 11.
Well, thank you so much, Brent. Brent, and I know one of my experiences is how important it is for siblings who are not placed together. They can go to Royal Kids Camp and spend a week together as siblings. And so I know that has been my experience. Kendra, I'm going to toss it over to you. What led to you becoming a caregiver? And I know you also hold another role in the community also.
Yes. Miyam Tuminue, Notong Kendra Aguilar. That's greeting in my Luiseño language. My name's Kendra Aguilar. For me, this is sort of a familiar and cultural legacy. My Aunt Michelle Aguilar Wells was the head of the Governor's Office of Indian Affairs for many years and ended up being one of the first listed witnesses for ICWA way back decades ago, and worked really hard as a caseworker here in Washington State to help make sure Native families could get the same benefits that non-Native families got as kinship providers. We always had kinship children in our home growing up. And so when we got the call, it's just what we do as Native people, right? We take all children are all of our children. So it was just a no-brainer for us to become kinship licensed and take in children over the years. We took in children through DCYF and also through the Muckleshoot tribe. So we have both of those different lived experiences. And then as Katie was referring to in my day job, I'm interim executive director of Families of Color Seattle. We also serve folks in Snohomish and Pierce counties. And we basically help build a loving, strong, supportive community for our BIPOC children. And we're currently offering parent group support groups and classes, including we've recently partnered with Alliance Cares to provide BIPOC foster youth and their caregivers these supportive groups and environments to build bridges and better connections.
Well, thank you both. I appreciate you sharing a little bit about yourselves as caregivers, but also what you bring to this world in other ways. And so thank you for all you do. And thank you for all the families and kids you support. So let's see. Kendra, I'm going to toss this one to you first, followed by Brent. If you could wave a magic wand, what changes would you make to better support children and families in our DCYF child welfare system?
Well, thank you. And thank you all to our honorable senators and representatives and everyone who's here today to listen to our stories. For me, I think it's probably not a surprise to most of us that the department is very underfunded and under-resourced. I'll just say kind of as an example, the caseworkers and the guardian ad litems that we worked with had over between 75 and 125 cases on their load at any given time, to the point where our guardian ad litem wasn't even able to get to us and have the first visit until 6 months after our placements had been placed with us. And and they ended up having to take a leave of absence just due to the overwhelm. And I think the heartbreak of not being able to serve their families well. What I know about the department is that everybody that we worked with, they're there for the right reasons. They're there because they care and they want to make a difference in children's lives. But the lack of resources and funding can make that impossible sometimes. And then, of course, that trickles down and impacts us, the caregivers, and then the children that we care for. And I think the other thing I would say also is that the most unfortunate part of the system, being Native and a Native kinship caregiver under ICWA, especially since that's such a big part of my family legacy, I was excited to be able to serve in that area. But the attorneys and a lot of, especially the attorneys, unfortunately, were causing more harm than good to Native families. They were trying to cause a rift. I think it's just in their mind, you know, we appreciate that they represent the parents in these cases, but in this case, the parents and us are family, right? Like we care about each other and we wanted to support each other. And the attorneys just kept acting as if they were acting as if our case was just like every other case, and that for some reason we would be at war with each other, and we weren't. But they continuously caused tension and rifts between us and almost destroyed our relationship. And it has taken a lot of time for us to rebuild our relationship, but we have. So I'm really proud of us for that, despite these other characters that enter into the system. But again, at least in our experience, the caseworkers, the guardian ad litems, everyone else we worked with really cared and wanted to help. They just, their hands were tied. You know, our kiddo had to stay in, one of our kiddos had to stay in hotels because there weren't, we had to separate our siblings. And due to our older sibling not being able to get the care that he needed as a child who was not yet diagnosed with autism. And I'll say sort of this last part is that I basically had to go part-time in my day job to make enough time in my schedule to do the advocacy work I needed to do to make sure that that Native child with autism was actually able to get in and get his diagnosis. He was on a year-long wait list, and because he'd been moved around so much, you know, every time he moves, he has to start over. And so I called those clinics every day, multiple times a day, until they found a cancellation and fit me in. And it made such a huge difference once he got services. But I hate to think of where he would have been had we not been able to do that. So again, like if I could change anything, it would be making sure that Native children who are in the system get at the head of the line for all services, especially so that we can honor the treaties of these lands. Thank you for letting me talk so long on that.
Oh, thank you very much, Kendra. Thank you for sharing that little part of your story too. We've heard a lot about hotel stays here. I think you're one of the first people we've talked to who have kind of experienced that as someone who loves a kid who had to stay in hotels. So thank you for sharing that. How about you, Brent? What would you change if you could wave a magic wand right now?
As I thought about this question, if I had a magic wand, I think the change would be to somehow create better contact with parents and caregivers. I think it's a very large piece of the work that's kind of being overlooked. For example, I guess we haven't had a lot of placements where there's been a lot of teamwork between the parents and us as a family. It's more about just kind of checking the boxes to get everything done. And I really feel like if we could somehow be introduced, or if there could be meetings maybe officiated by DCYF, even if parents don't show up, just the invitation of, hey, let's get everyone together. The family would really love to have you, come and hang out with, your son or daughter. at the park or at this place. And I know it's a lot of work, but again, if it's a magic wand, I think that's the missing piece that we've seen in the last 6 years. We need contact with the parents, because when the kiddos are gone, generally the contact is 100% over. We don't get to see the kids anymore. We don't get to love on them. They don't get to know that we still love them. It's just another complete break in their relational trauma. And I think that's really hard. And I think a lot of the parents, I think they're scared. I think they're worried. I think they're intimidated. And my wife and I would love nothing more to just say, like, our house is open. I mean, I know we can't invite them to our house, but we want you to be a part of this. Like, we're doing this so that your son or daughter can get back to you. And so whatever we can do to help you. And we just haven't seen that. And I know it's hard. But again, if we had the magic wand, that's probably one of the first things I would do, is create more opportunities for caregivers and parents to align, to join, to be a team during the process.
Well, Brent, I couldn't have said it any better. So the last many, many, many years, my work in this system has been doing that, is creating that exact program. And it's here, and now I see a disconnect. You've been doing it for 6 years, wishing for it. Family Connections has been up and running for 5 years that does just that. And so you inspire me to continue the work and figure out, how can we make sure that there are folks who are like, please, let's figure out how to be a team with these kids. Because I really, it hurts my heart to think of, I think the number is 21 kids whose connection was severed when they moved from your house. And that sucks. We need to just sit with that. 21 kids have now had another loss as part of being in foster care, and we can do better. Okay. Kendra, I'm gonna give this one to you, and then you, Brent. What do you wish the folks sitting here listening to you today understood about the day-to-day realities? Kendra, you talked about this a little bit. You said, I had to be able to reduce my income to part-time so that I could advocate for this kid. That's not something we expect when we're coming in, is like, and I can't tell you how many caregivers I talk to have to quit their jobs or lose their jobs because you have to be available for all these meetings. And some folks are fortunate to work in a world where that's possible, and others, you can't just say, oh gosh, an FTDM popped up tomorrow, I'll be in work late, boss, and expect to keep your job. And so what do you wish, I'm giving you your mic, what do you want these folks to know about day to day?
Thank you for that, Katie. And yes, I did, speak to one aspect of it earlier, in that the amount of time it really takes. And, the two kiddos we had the most recently, one was a newborn who was born addicted to fentanyl, and had other serious issues. And so medically, he was a high medical needs case, and so was his 5-year-old brother, as I spoke to earlier. So they both had, challenging needs. And it really was so much time. And then also, we were a unique case in that we were in King County, but the case was in Thurston, because they couldn't find other Native kinship caregivers to step in. And that was so important to the family, to the parents. And so when we had to show up for meetings and cases, and doing the travel for the visitations when they happened, it was across county lines. And so it took even more time. The baby was so bonded to us because we raised him from almost birth, like very young, till 2.5. He was really struggling emotionally with visitations because they were sporadic, etc. And so we made ourselves available to do the driving most of the time. It really is. And I think, Brent, without, like, you embody this, right? How much love and care we put into the children. And it does affect us, of course, emotionally, financially. Our relationships with our family and friends in some cases became strained because their hearts were breaking for what we were going through. And the children are the most important thing here, obviously, but as the main caregivers in this equation, we're oftentimes treated like the least important piece in the puzzle by the whole system, not individual people necessarily. And when it comes to like the decisions about the children, we know them best. We're there with them every second of every day. And that's one place in the system where the voice of caregivers there isn't as much room. And again, I think that's mostly due to the legal system is where we saw it with the attorneys that seem to feel like there's this natural division between parents and caregivers when that's not the case. And I can't support what you said, Brent, before more, right? And that we really need, and Katie, I'm so happy to hear there's a program in place to foster those relationships between the caregivers and the parents. But really, again, it's just to remember that as the caregivers, we're often the ones who know these children best and would like to be a part of as much as possible the decisions that shape their lives, and like you said, to continue some kind of relationship if possible, so that doesn't become another loss for them.
No, thank you so much, Kendra. I just really appreciate what you both are bringing to this conversation, and just thank you very much. Brent, I'm gonna let you tell us, what do you want this panel of policymakers and legislators and all sorts of different experience with this system, what do you want them to know? Here's your mic.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, what they didn't tell us in foster care licensing training is just how hard it was going to be. They try to prep you, but they don't get to the actual meat of it, that it's 24 hours a day of care for another human being. And it's a really hard concept to grasp when you're just thinking, oh, I want to bring a few, kids into my home, and, I want to be able to help them and their families reunite. As Kendra was saying, when we get invitations to weddings and we have a 4- and 5-year-old sibling set, it changes everything. It changes everything, like how we show up, right? How we can be involved. But really, I think what I would love everybody to know is just simply how difficult it is. And we wouldn't change the last 6 years for anything, but it's not for everybody. It's most definitely not for everybody. I think the lifespan of a foster home is probably less than 3 years, if I remember right, just because it's so difficult to do. But it impacts everything. It impacts your relationships, as Kendra said. It impacts your home. And surprisingly enough, my wife and I didn't kind of compute this into our decision making, but it affected the way we had to parent our own biological children. And that was kind of a tough thing to kind of discover, right? We have an expectation for our biological children. We have the same expectation for our foster children, but we have a different set of rules that we have to apply. And it's just, we managed well. The boys were very supportive. I don't think they're going to be upset with us in the future, when they become adults and have their own families. I think they learned a lot, and it's going to probably benefit them more than anything. But the impacts are kind of all around with the family, how you raise your family, how you go out into the community. For us, we did everything the same. It just, every 6 months, our vibe was a little bit different, because sometimes we had a 10-year-old and sometimes we had an infant, and so every time we're just at a different stage of life for the last 6 years, every few months. So I think if everybody just understands how hard it is, and I bet most do, but again, I would have never thought that it would have been as hard as it has been when we started doing our licensing in 2019. I knew it was going to be hard. I just didn't know exactly how hard. So the support we do get from people and from the community is really important to us, because it shows everyone's care for the work that we're doing, and it kind of helps us to continue to go.
Yeah, as you were speaking, I think one thing I've learned over many years that isn't part of caregiver training, and I think it should be, is really that our role is stepping into a family in crisis. I think you kind of get this idea from going to caregiver core training. You're also stepping into a system in crisis. And so while it looks like, family time visits should occur at this time and transportation shouldn't even be a thing you have to worry about other than getting a call from the transporter. And we don't understand well enough, at least I didn't, that I was stepping into a family in crisis. And as part of choosing to step into that, I was bringing crisis to my family too. And like Brent said, I wish I had had more knowledge and tools going into how to support the kids already in my home. And it just was very difficult. And I think you have to realize you are stepping into a crisis situation. And so things like not being able to finish your workday because somebody's got to get picked up because they're having a tough day. And that's part of like the crisis set of looking at things rather than this is a smooth system and I'm going to just be this little cog in the wheel and it's going to just keep going. Looks like Representative Kagi is wondering, we're going to take a little detour now. What support do you all get now? Not what you wish you had, what you had now. Brent, I'll give it to you first and then Kendra.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we're very blessed that we got licensed through Olive Crest in West Sound. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't think we'd be doing this anymore if we didn't have Olive Crest as our kind of our bridge to understand what's happening and what's going on. They've been amazing. So Olive Crest does a really good job of supporting the families that they license, as far as they show up to all the court dates and the appointments and the FTDMs. They provide input. They call us to make sure we know what's going on, or like, hey, did you understand what just happened in court? I'm like, no, I have no idea. And so they would explain that to us, which was very beneficial, because if my wife and I had to, kind of talk back and forth about, well, what did that mean? We would probably not get anywhere. So it's been really nice. They also offer, supplies, and when they get donations, those come out. They always had diapers and pull-ups when we had younger kiddos. So that's probably our main support. The department has provided clothing vouchers and things for kids who have come with really nothing, and so that has been really beneficial as well. The counties we've worked with have moved pretty quickly on those, so that's been helpful.
What about you, Kendra?
Yes, thank you. I would say the same. We were fortunate to be able to take advantage of the vouchers, especially coming in with a newborn. We'd never raised a baby before, and so we needed everything. And even though we had vast community, most of our friends had already raised their babies and things. And so we were able to use vouchers, although there are caps on things, and sometimes they're able to make an exception here and there. But it was kind of always making do with what we could. There's also restrictions on the types of things you could use. Something special with our case being Native American, we knew from our own community's research, and we're talking about someone with a master's in this topic of using cradle boards, our traditional forms of sleep for our children. And the system was only going to allow us to do that up to, I think, the first 6 months of his life. But we know that extended cradle board use has, extreme benefits for our children. And so we had to go get a doctor's note. And of course, doctors are like, we don't know about this and native care. So we had to find native doctors, anyway, it was a whole thing. So there are some supports in place, but even then, at least they're not always culturally grounded and supported. And so we have to end up fighting to get to use the very resources that are meant for us in the way that is beneficial for our specific children. And again, I kind of spoke to the other support was the guardian ad litem, although we weren't able to actually connect with them for the first 6 months. And so that was very difficult. We really did rely a lot on community. I know the department did the best they could, but they are so restricted. and money is so tight that there were times when our caseworker was just, their heart was bleeding for us and this kiddo, wanting to give more supports, and just they couldn't. Their hands were tied. So
Oh, thank you, Kendra. I appreciate that. What about the Alliance? You wanted to talk about the support you'd received through the Alliance.
Alliance Cares, yeah, so they're out of UW, and they put on a lot of the caregiver training. And they were an incredible resource. I ended up, I'm a joiner type person, so I would just sign up for any classes I possibly could. I wanted to, I know Brent, you talked about, like, learn as much as I could. And it's oftentimes peer supported. So we're getting to be in environments with people who have been through this. So I started to have, get to learn, like, oh, this is what it really looks like to be a part of this. And that was really helpful. I'm getting to have access to that, continued training. And then they also have parent support groups that they put on. And that's where Families of Color Seattle got the idea to partner with them to put on groups for BIPOC foster youth and their caregivers. Because when I attended our support groups, which was in the South End here in our neighborhood, people were traveling from all over the city just to come. And, we had mostly babies and they had older kids, and they were just so desperate for that support and to, be able to share with each other. So we saw that need there. The other thing that was good that came out of that is one of the people in the support groups, we're like best friends now. It turns out they live in our neighborhood just on the other side of the street. And so we were able to build these, what are going to become lifelong connections. And they were able to get guardianship of their child and just had another biological baby. So we're getting to grow alongside their family, which is a benefit to another, probably unintended but wonderful benefit of that Alliance Cares partnership.
I love that you have that. What all, if you could name 2 supports that would make your life a lot easier, what would it be? Childcare, help getting kids to family time. What is it that you need? Understanding the court process better?
I can say, in one place I forgot to give accolades was, we were able to join a Birth to 3 program through a local agency, which was life-changing for our little. We went from this baby who, because again, he had to be resuscitated at birth, he was addicted to fentanyl and had severe medical issues. My husband and I ended up being on a 24-hour sleep schedule with him so that somebody was always watching him sleep. We were so scared. He was at such high risk for SIDS, and getting to work with a Birth to 3 program was just immensely helpful once that was in place. And I know that that's something that has come up, for our senators and representatives, in during the legislative session. So getting to have that support and have those programs funded and available to all caregivers, I think is just a lifeline. I think it's so necessary for these children. And then the other place, oh my gosh. I think that caregivers need emotional support and mental health support. This is such a hard thing, even though we know that the goal is always reunification and we're all working so desperately towards that goal. There are not only when reunification happens, it can still be a very difficult emotional thing, but everything we've talked about in the whole process, the whole time of caregiving, it's not always easy. It's never easy, but we had an incident where extended family members of the parents who we had a good relationship with, but the extended family, there's a lot of generational trauma in our communities. And I don't want to focus just on that, but it is part of being Native because of these systems, actually. And so especially when it comes to the loss of our children, I'm a descendant of a boarding school survivor. And so, that trauma of our children being taken and stolen from us and then harmed or killed is very still real and happening in our lifetime. And so these extended family members really had challenges with that. And they were sometimes taking things to extreme places to try to ensure their own kind of agenda around placement of the child. And it caused a lot of harm to my husband and I, to the point where we recently let our license lapse or expire because and we need some time to kind of mend and heal before we would be able to open ourselves up again. And Brent, you spoke to that a little bit. It is really, really hard. And some of the trauma that we witness in the children, we're getting secondary trauma from these experiences. So getting to have mental health supports for the caregivers, I think, would be really important. Thank you for letting me talk so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Brent, do you want to speak to that, or do you want to hop on to the next question of kind of systemic challenges?
Oh, I would love to speak to that. I wrote down two things, but kind of real quick, just to kind of speak on what Kendra was saying. It generally, I would say in like 80% of our placement, it takes about 1 day for the kiddos to call me dad. So you can understand like how emotional it is when they leave, whether it's 1 day or 1 year, when you've been called dad for that long. And that surprised the heck out of me when we started doing foster care. That was the first thing they would do, is instantly convert my wife and I to mom and dad. And it's not just knowing, I mean, they say the word constantly, hey dad, hey dad, hey dad. You know, they're just kind of begging for that. So it's really hard to see them go. But as far as the two things, one thing that would be very helpful, and this is probably where a community organization would come in handy a little bit better, but coverage for visits. So visits are kind of a crazy part of foster care. And when I say visits, I mean, you visit when the child goes to visit their parent or parents, or even a family member. Over half of the appointments our kiddos have been canceled. And so the schedule for a family is, you know, you don't have just kind of endless time to put aside your day for a visit. So when a child leaves in a visit monitor's car for a visit, you're like, okay, they'll be back in 3 hours. I can go do this, this, and this. I have my son's doctor's appointment. We have to go pick up glasses. 10 minutes down the road, visit was canceled. We're turning around. Yikes. Like, okay, now what do I do? I have, so we've canceled many appointments and we've done many things, but might be a pipe dream. But I mean, that seems like that would be super beneficial to have some sort of coverage for visits or help there. And then the other thing is maybe more of a simple task, but also difficult in its own right, is more communication from DCYF. And what I mean is, I would like to be included in more of not being able to make the decisions, but knowing what the decisions that were made, when they were made, on like right away. Just last week, we found out that our foster son we have right now is returning home on October 31st after only 3 overnight visits with his dad after 4 years. And we were just kind of like, wait, what? You had a closed door meeting and didn't tell anybody you were having it? We had no idea. So just having a little bit more communication about those decisions would help prepare us as a home.
As you were talking, Brent, I remember I'm not currently licensed either, but every single time I had a kid in my home and the phone rang and I saw that it was the department, my stomach immediately dropped, because I was terrified that they were going to say, pack up this child. They have to move. And here's this child I've cared for, like you said, for a long time. It was really hard. It caused anxiety every time, because I hear all the time from caregivers who have 2 hours to plan, or an hour to say goodbye to someone they've loved for a long time. And so, have you been offered any support, Brent, in preparing a transition plan for this child?
No, unfortunately, the last two placements, we had a sibling set of brothers, and then this young boy we have right now who just turned 11 last Monday. We have had zero input on transition plan. It really has come down to attorneys, and it's kind of like what Kendra spoke to, it's getting really ugly. You know, like the attorneys are making decisions in the FTDMs, the family togetherness meetings. That, you know, they're not even doing it in court. They're putting the pressure on the state, so like they're pushing so hard in these meetings. You know, I think that the system, the state can see what's coming, and so they just, I call it cave. I know it's not quite that easy, but they cave in the planning meetings, the transition planning meetings, to the demands of the attorneys, and then, you know, that's it.
No, thank you. I believe Jack has joined. Jack, are you here? There you are.
Yes.
Hello, Jack.
Hey,
Thank
sorry.
you for joining. I am going to let you introduce yourself, just a little bit about who you are, why you're sitting here today, and your experience as a caregiver, just like 2 to 3 minutes.
Sure. So my name's Jack, and with my husband Nick, we've been licensed foster parents since March 2020, which was fascinating timing. We take teenagers mostly. I think we're licensed 8 to 18, 6 to 18, something like that. But our long-term kids have all been 18 or over in extended foster care. Anything else I should cover?
No, that's good. So you bring the experience of caring for kids who are in extended foster care. And so I'm really glad you're going to bring that lens. We're going to backtrack just a second. Jack, I know one of the questions you really wanted to answer was, if you could wave a magic wand, what would one change be to better support children and families in our state?
One of the things I would do is create stronger sibling rights that don't depend on parental rights, really. And we've had some poor experiences around that, where people think adoption essentially ends that connection, or can. So at one point, we lived about 8 blocks from our foster kid's sister who had been adopted, and the adoptive parents wouldn't let them see each other. And there's nothing anyone can do about that. So that was obviously a pretty significant experience, and just, I don't even know how to fix that, but I would like to.
That one, yeah, that's a heavy one, Jack. Like, and that's not the only time I've heard it. You're right. Sibling rights disappear at adoption, which isn't fair.
These kids were like 14 and 16 when the younger one was adopted, so they were absolutely going to get back in touch as soon as allowed.
Yeah. And there was no support in like, did you receive support in trying to rebuild a relationship with this adoptive parent and be like, we need to put these kids first?
Well, like, support as in emotional, yeah, but there's, like I said, nobody had the ability to do anything or say this should happen. So in fact, they had other siblings, and it was the adoptive parent of one of the other siblings who did some of the like in-between work and tried to make that happen.
Wow. That's hard. I can tell how hard that was to support a kid through losing their sibling when they're blocks away. What about, when is the time you felt unsupported by the department or confused by the system, and what would have helped? I'm going to do Brent, then Kendra, and then Jack, if you want to, you can jump in.
Great. Which question was that? Do you remember?
Yeah,
So I
can
got
you
my
give an
notes.
example of a time when you felt unsupported or confused by the system, and what would have helped?
What number was that?
It is number 5.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking right at it.
That's all right.
Yep.
And if you feel you've
Right.
answered it, that's okay too.
Well, maybe. So that we're talking about relationships with birth parents and kin.
Oh, sorry. No,
That's number 5.
we were talking about challenges and systemic barriers. Like,
Oh, okay.
sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Jumped you around a little bit there, Brent. Yeah, a time when you
That's-
felt unsupported or confused by the system, and what would have helped.
Well, I think so. I feel like I don't think I have a specific example for this, but I think our first maybe 4 years we learned a lot. But I feel like we were very supported. Maybe it's because we were new and we didn't know any better. But these last couple of years have been really hard. And if I might provide my own opinion, I think that HB 1227 had a lot to do with what's going on currently, because we saw a significant shift pre-July 2023 to post-July 2023 in how DCYF, how the system really made their decisions and supported the kids and the families. And these last few years, the last few years have been very difficult because it feels like, and I know it's been said, we don't have a say in what's going on, with the kiddos, even though they tell us here at the house what they're feeling, unless they tell their caseworker or their attorney or somebody else, we can just provide that feedback. Unless it comes from the kiddos and they're old enough, it doesn't really kind of hold a lot of water. So I think just these last few years have been hard because so many things have changed, and maybe we're just still trying to get used to it and trying to figure it out. But we have seen a significant shift. So that's all I have for that one for now.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think we're not gonna delve 1227's a whole panel all unto itself. I appreciate you raising it, and I think it's definitely something that needs to be looked into more. It's an incredibly complex situation, and so hear you definitely. And yeah, I promote more discussion on it because we got it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, but I think more than anything, if I can, it's just I don't think the timing is coincidental, right? Because it was really like those first couple of years, we were like, oh, this is great. We're being supported. The social workers reaching out to us, probably twice a month. Filling us in on what's going on. We had so many different placements, and it just hasn't had that same feeling. Could be that a lot of our cases come from out of Kitsap County, so they're from other counties. We just happen to have an open bed, so we get the placement.
Interesting. What about you, Kendra?
I think just kind of reflecting, hearing, Brent, Jack, what we've been talking about, I think the biggest hardship has come with the legal system. And the fact that I understand that, I think, again, all the players individually all have good intentions, good hearts, are acting in good faith. But, a judge can only do with what they have in front of them. And in our case, where we didn't have a guardian ad litem for so long, and then we get one and they're so overwhelmed, they have 20 minutes within a year. We spoke for 20 minutes to talk to me, and they're the ones who are supposed to speak for the best interest of this child. And our voice as caregiver wasn't able to come in. And they were things that the judge, we did our best in our reports, but even then we're within certain limits. We can't just say, here's really what's happening. Like, I wish the judge really knew what was happening and going on, but we all have to play our parts in very, with restrictions. So unless somebody else speaks for us, and things just aren't heard or known. And so there was a lot of injustice done to the children, and I wouldn't say it's by the fault of the judge themselves, because again, they can only do so much, and they can only do with what they have in front of them. And if someone isn't putting all the information in front of them, they can't help. And so that was really, really heartbreaking and hard. I cannot say enough how under-resourced the department is. in all areas, in all aspects, including having, when I think of like the turnover rates that happen due to the hardship of this work. I'm friends with former and current social workers under ICWA and not. And the burnout rates that happen, especially for like the new folks who come in and we think, oh, good, new people, they aren't burnt out yet. But they're so underprepared to enter this environment just as much as the caregivers are, with such few resources and not enough time to get up to speed, that it's just a disservice to everybody. Yet I know there's such a need for new people in the field or additional people in the field. So just the system as we know, it's just kind of broken overall. And it really, I know money doesn't fix everything, but this is one of those rare cases where if we had more resources and financial support from the legislature, etc., we could start to address all of these issues so much better. Yeah, it's just hard when you're seeing the kiddo.
Yeah,
and
do you
the
see,
impact.
I don't know if you see the in the chat,
I
Judge
do.
Ellen asked about if any of you are submitting or being encouraged to submit caregiver reports for court hearings, and whether you receive invitations to attend shared planning meetings. Anyway, just curious about perhaps responding to that, Katie.
Yeah, definitely. It was a excellent dovetail because Kendra had just mentioned them. So anyone, are you being encouraged when court occurs to submit caregiver reports by someone? Yes,
Yeah.
no? Yes. Kendra?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Do you feel, I know the caregiver report to the court was revised a couple years ago to try and give a better holistic picture of how the child is doing instead of just little buckets, and then really also allowing caregivers to have a place to say, like, I see this and this needs to happen in order for this child to have this. Kind of like you in the autism appointments, that could have been something to bring up to the judge, is like, I can't work part-time so I can chase a clinic appointment. Like, I need help. What is your experience with the helpfulness? Like, do you guys feel like the caregiver report gives you a good place to express how the child is doing, or not really? And we have 4 minutes left. So I'm going to let each of you do for a minute, and then we're going to have to wrap up. Sorry. And Brent, there you go.
Yeah. I can start. So, yeah, it has been hit and miss with caregiver reports. Sometimes we get them a week before and they're due like 2 weeks prior to court. So, feels a little bit like it doesn't matter, but we have turned in a couple, and it felt like they were really impactful, and it felt like the judge was able to read them and basically take it to heart. So.
Excellent. How about you, Jack?
I don't think I've ever been asked to fill one out, and it occurs to me that I'm not sure if they want them or they're supposed to get them for the extended foster care kids. So obviously
excellent question to which I have no idea either.
Yeah, there's not exactly the same issues, and I think where important, my kids have gone with their lawyer themselves.
Okay.
So it's not something I've ever felt like I needed to be doing. But
okay, very interesting.
That I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But shared decision-making meetings we have been invited to, and we've been definitely felt like our input was being taken there.
Excellent. What about you, Kendra? Do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah. So we were, again, the biggest issue we had was with the parents' attorneys who had been working together for a really long time. And I know we're really respected in the courts, but they are very harmful to the families themselves. And I probably plan on filing a report to the commissioner about that. But we were invited to do family meetings at first. And then one of the attorneys convinced the mom to tell us not to be involved anymore, even though she was telling me she did want it, but she was just doing what her attorney told her. That was a problem. So we often didn't even know when court cases were happening, or it was very last minute. There was a lot of things happening with the case that were very last minute. So when we did have the opportunity to know in advance, I mean, sometimes it was, there's a court hearing right now, can you jump on? And they weren't planning on telling us. I'm just telling you, this does happen. And we did do some reports. Again, but they're sort of restricted. And so we couldn't, and we were even told, like, you can't say all the things you want to say because, and the attorneys were pretty aggressive, even though we were trying to work towards reunification. And as far as the planning meetings, I mean, really, and Brent, you spoke about this, the being involved in transition planning or having any kind of a transition is something we had to fight and advocate for our special needs child who we had raised since almost birth, and he was 2.5 years old leaving us. We had to beg and fight and use all our entire arsenal of support to be heard, just to have any kind of transition plan, and it was still like that. And he did really suffer a lot for a long time after that transition without the proper visitation and support. So anyway, that's what I'll say about that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, transition planning is another hot button of mine because it's so important and we know how to do it well. There's people who know this stuff about child development and how we can put together a transition for a child that allows that connection to continue in whatever way it looks like and the child supported. And I remember I had one that was a kiddo I'd had for several months, also had some special needs. And we went to court and he was returned home an hour later. I had actually had a really good relationship with his mom. And his mom was the one that turned to me after court and she's like, this seems really sudden. I'm okay with it, but I'm worried your family won't even get to say goodbye to him because your kids are at school. And so we came up with a transition that would allow them to still see each other. But this is a little place in the system that we know how to do better. And if caregivers knew you're going to have the opportunity to be part of a transition plan for these kids, as opposed to your phone could ring and this could be it, it just could be a small change. It can make a big difference. And I want to thank you all so much for coming here, for joining us, for sharing your experience, for bringing us down to the 100 level foot and out of the 30,000, and just significant appreciation to you all. And props to everyone who changed the law last year. So all these wonderful people will get stipends in recognition of their time and expertise. And so with that, I will conclude this panel and say thank you so very much.
I just want to thank all of you, not only for being here today, but for everything you do for kids and families across the state. And I know I mean that myself, but I mean that on behalf of this entire oversight board. And your work does not go unnoticed. It also goes unresourced oftentimes, and I know that as well. And we're pretty good at making policy, not so much sometimes on funding the policy we make, which is something we have to do better at as a legislature. Because as I say often, our systems were never put in place to get people out of them, and we need to help support, but also support you and support families as kids are returned as well. So just incredibly powerful conversation and powerful presentation, and really thanks for speaking your truth. I see Pamela has her hand up, and I'm gonna give her a 30-second time, and then we are going to go to a break. But Pamela, we've not heard from you today, so is there something you'd like to share? Okay, well, we may be having tech difficulties. What we're going to do is we're going to move to break. We'll be coming back at noon on the dot, so please feel free to shut down your video. Do not shut down your computer. But if you want to mute yourselves and turn off the video cameras, we'll come back at noon. And again, thanks so much for this powerful presentation, and thanks for the work that you're doing for families and for children across the state. Thanks, Katie. Lillian, can you hear us now?
Yep. I don't know why that was so hard with my system, but it was. So sorry.
You are so fine. You just missed the best introduction ever. That's just what I'll say. So I am going to pass it off to you. I was just saying how much I appreciate sitting in the meetings and listening to the work going on behalf of kids and families across our state, and want to thank you first and foremost for coordinating and facilitating that. And just want to give you an opportunity here to share more about what's going on, and it's all yours.
Well, that's an honor to be introduced by Senator Wilson, personal hero of mine. So thank you so much. Hi, everyone. And I'm glad to be here today with, I'm just awed by the number of leaders in the room who are contributing to DCYF. So thank you for lending your expertise and your skills to the work. My name is Lillian Ferraz. I grew up in East Tacoma, Washington in the 9404 zip code. And that's part of why I do government work, is because I grew up in a very de-invested community. And I know that if we come together with community partners, we can build a better future for our children. So I know you all know that and believe in that. So thank you for the work that you do. I will get started with the presentation. And get us rolling. I'm so sorry for the delay. Okay. Great. So the Family Separation Rapid Response Team was started in January 27th by Governor Ferguson through executive order. The full executive order is available on our webpage, and I will show you that webpage in just a moment. The purpose of the team is to support children whose parents or caregivers are detained or deported through policy revision and recommendation. During this presentation itself, I want to talk to you about the team, the Rapid Response Team, review some of the resources, the family ready resources we've created. And if we have time, one that's in creation right now, and just overview the last few months that we have. I just want to say that this is an incredibly huge topic. It is also one that is deeply personal to, I don't know, pretty much every person I come across is affected or sensitive to immigration. And so I just want to say that you're welcome to express any range of questions. All things are related to this work, and welcome pause or consideration for any part of these topics. I'm very flexible, and I know this team can have me back again as needed. But with that, I want to roll through and say that the partners that we have at the table are mainly our subject matter experts, our policy experts throughout the state enterprise, and that comprises of around 25 to 35 people representing a variety of agencies through each meeting. And I want to highlight that our state commissions, the Commission on Hispanic Affairs with Maria, and the Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs with NAM, have been instrumental and incredibly helpful in the work, along with Senator Wilson, who attends regularly, along with and other representatives as they can. But that consistent attendance and review of a wide variety of materials has really led us to be able to sort through an incredible number of policies and narrow in on what changes we can make here in Washington State. And most specifically, we've had our partners in the immigration legal field most regularly attend and be part of the conversation in and outside of the meetings. Those are NERP, LCYC, Wizen has also been in regular attendance. And I highlight those community partners just because that is so much the source of our challenge and change is what is within the realm of immigration law, what's in the realm of state law, federal law, as these changes from the federal government keep on coming. And I would say particularly in the first 6 months of the current federal administration, that has been critical. So we do work with other community organizations, but those have been our main partners because it's the source of the challenge. The first 6 months or so, we've been doing a combination of learning, investigating, and discerning what recommendations from various partners across the state and community partners have for our team. We have, I want to say, over 35 specific recommendations or policies that I've been tracking in various areas. Many of those were resolved within the team itself. I'm happy to give a few examples of those, but they will be summarized in our final report as well. And about 9 or 8 are outlying things that we could not solve within the team and will be present as well in our final report. 2 of those recommendations were already published in an interim report in July. So that's, I would say, the bulk of the first 6 months and then the last few. Within that, in terms of deliverables, we have 2 reports and 2 informational flyers. I do want to say that decision package coordination, I've been in state government for 5 years and have worked on at least 3 years during that on cross-state projects. And that is limited experience. Many people have worked much longer in state government, but I do not often see the departmental proposal process so open. And I wanted to push for that. And I want to name that in particular with all of you leaders who regularly engage in the legislative process, that the roundtable method that I've seen successfully done in community in Tacoma have applied to the process here, in that normally our departmental proposals for funding to the legislature are very isolated. They're even isolated within agencies, within program, within leadership. And what we did in this project is we roundtabled around the focus, which is families in need of support who are at risk of deportation and detention, and said what funding is related to this and how do we need to coordinate across agencies, across these boundaries and these governmental institutions that divide us across what is the most important thing, which is these families. It was a tough conversation. It was very difficult to elucidate discussion, but we got, I think, to a really good point and able to coordinate on, I think we have 5 major departmental proposals that have been submitted ultimately to the governor. And when it comes to the governor's budget in December, we will see which of those got picked up, and we'll summarize them with a 1-pager of what we all as a team think need to be funded by the state ongoing to support this work. So I just want to name that as a process to encourage in other cross-enterprise activity. And I think something's in the chat, so I'm just gonna keep that really quick. Yes, Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. So the 2 websites that I want to mention, many of these have been sent out by social media, and I just ask that just continue. CHA, I'm not going to show today, but I will put a link to it in the chat. That is the Commission on Hispanic Affairs, their rapid response hub that was created in January with a number of partners, including the Department of Financial Institutions, with resources really ready for individuals and workers here in Washington State who are trying to maintain their livelihoods and their lives with as much sense of resource and normalcy as possible. And it's an excellent resource for individuals and adults. The page that I'm going to show you is the one that we've crafted through this work as a resource. And I know a lot of government websites are out there. I've made quite a few pages of my own, and a lot of what you have on that page is please email this person, and here's 3 reports. Very familiar with that. I do think that this resource is fairly robust, and I've gotten pretty good responses so far from other government providers and community providers who have found it very useful. And so I'm just going to highlight with you here today some of the things that we've created so you can share them in your networks, and then ask a little bit about the final resource if we have time for your input on co-creation. So if folks are wondering about the rapid response team, where to go, where to get more information, you can tell them to research the Department of Children, Youth, and Families on Google, pull it up, and it's right here on the front page, Family Separation Rapid Response Team, also available in Spanish and Somali. You can learn more, and I'll put the direct link in the chat and also in follow-up email. So again, you can contact me here. There's a bit of news, but I'm going to start from the bottom and say that one of the biggest questions that I get from providers, community partners, and others is, Lillian, what is your team doing to help cut through the overwhelming, just quick question, are we being recorded? Just for language purposes, we are. Okay, great. The overwhelming, I just have to be careful with my language, overwhelming number of changes coming from the current federal administration. And how are we getting to the truth? And it seems simple, the FAQ, but we have spent a good number of hours with legal partners discussing answers to questions that we've received, definitely more than one time, on services that DCYF provides, but also how we interact with other parts of the system. A big part of that is the FAQ, and it is also in some of the resources I'll talk about after this. So a lot of providers, those who are directly in care, have really appreciated these clear and succinct questions to really complex immigration systems. And I'm coming out with another FAQ batch of 20 more, and I get more questions all the time that when we update, we tell folks on our listserv that it's coming. And it has been really helpful because immigration is impacting every service across the state in so many ways. And it's helpful to have quick answers. So that has been something we've been coordinating. These other resources on our website are very well curated. I highly recommend sending people here. The last 3 pieces I'm going to show you are the ones that I would say are the most family ready. The first of them is really in detail. If people are our providers would be interested in this. It's about 6 minutes with Doreen Perez, who I'm sure you're familiar with from Child Welfare, who explains how children could potentially come into the care of the state in Washington State, some language that's used to talk about unaccompanied children versus children who are separated here, and other pieces of that process that just help get a scope, especially for providers who are not regularly discussing or dealing with what can be really overwhelming legal and other types of frameworks around guardianship as well. This breaks it down very clearly. Pairing with that resource in multiple languages is this flowchart, which, though overwhelming, is still a simplification of a complex process that I was so grateful to work with our DCYF intake team on, and our legal team and our immigration partners, legal partners, to discern what happens when a parent is detained. And this is applicable across multiple instances of detainment. When the family's with the child, when they're not with the child, what can happen? And the 2 things that this really is meant to do for families as a passive resource offered in governments and schools, and it has been sent out to many institutions, The purpose is twofold. One, to emphasize to parents that creating an immigrant safety plan, which provides a legal framework to say, where does your child go in case you're detained? To emphasize that that is critical, and that's part of what this work does. The second thing is that ultimately, parents are making really overwhelming, it's so overwhelmed with decisions at this time, and it's so hard to talk about the hard things. But this tells parents what happens if your child is with an official guardian, an unofficial one. What happens if they encounter immigration customs enforcement or local police? How would they come into the care ultimately of foster care here in Washington State? We have regularly gotten questions like, are you creating a new foster care system for immigrant kids? Are you still putting kids into cages? And our answer is no, and no, we care for our kids just the same as all the others. And so there's a lot of misinformation out there, and one of the main things we can do is provide as clear a path as possible to show what could happen to these children. And so this is, I think, very helpful for providers to connect with families and talk it over. I want to briefly mention that this publication and others, I just got another suggestion today, is available for more translation, and they just have to email this communications@DCYF at the bottom. So if you hear of another language that is not listed, that is needed, and I'll just copy paste this for a moment in the chat. All of our flyers are translated into these languages. If you hear of another, you think of another that might be needed, we're happy to do that. We have no budget associated with this project, just my position. And one of the things that we can do that community-based organizations have asked for is just to translate things, because it does cost money, it does take time, and we don't want to put that on our CBOs. It's one thing that we can do because DCYF's translation budget is centralized, and I just want to note that is not the same across every agency, and it is really smart. So one huge kudo to DCYF. That is not the same everywhere. So the last, the second resource I want to highlight is the more general resources for families impacted by immigration-related concerns. We have a variety of resources listed here: Know Your Rights, legal, a little bit into Keep Washington Working, general, family resources as well. The top two that I think are most critical and that are here on the left are the Immigrant Safety Plan, which I spoke about earlier, really legal frameworks for guardianship and care of children, but also something that I will be building out more in our next resource as well, which is finance and business transition. So I can't remember who told it to me in the last couple of weeks, but love doesn't pay the bills, right? We need to make sure that whoever's in care of children ongoing is able to just deal with the financial transition of taking on the burden of another child. And I'm highlighting this in particular because unlike even the previous Trump administration, many of our children are coming into the care, according to many of our kinship providers and partners, many children are coming into the care of older siblings. Now, these older siblings may be, grown full adults with children of their own that, it's wonderful. But they also might be quite young. They might be 18, 19, 20, just barely becoming adults themselves. And it is overwhelming to deal with as a young adult with credit cards, with car payments, etc., let alone those that aren't your own, and a whole life to take over. And so this talks to families and is really meant to be the sort of preventative resource about how do you transition a credit card payment or a electricity bill. Like how do you do that? And it is a challenging conversation, but again, the most kind of real ready resource that we want to provide to families. So this has been shared across the state of Washington. I'm trying to track that sharing as much as possible. So if you do share it, please, I'll send a follow-up link on how to say like where you're sharing it. And the reason I mention that is because I just want to make sure that we're reaching every county that we can as much as possible and how often, because if we're missing certain areas, some people are not getting these resources. And I also want to say that these resources I think are very useful because providers and schools all want to support these families. And we hear that just so regularly, but they're saying, I don't know what is good advice to give to people. I can't hire an attorney and tell them where to go. I know about WISN, but I don't know about LCYC. I don't know what's important. And so this gives folks license and ability to support our families with legally viable and community partnered resources that are ready and we have all decided together are the most important. So I think of all the things that the task force is doing, I think that this has been probably the most family ready and the most actionable within what we can do as a government of Washington State, as a state government or smaller governments, while we're working against an immigration system that's being changed at the federal level and that we can't really impact. So I would just note that those are sort of the biggest ones. The final resource that I'll talk about is I need to retitle this, sorry, but the post-separation resource flyer. And this is in draft, but we've worked with FESS, family, I will get that acronym in just a moment, the FESS, and they do family support, sort of wraparound care, as well as the Mockingbird Society and a couple of experts out of WSU who study Washington State University, who study the sociological and psychological impacts of immigration trauma on multiple generations, and our intake providers here at DCYF. And the reason I mention all of those is because this flyer is really focused on that post-separation set of resources. So what happens if you come into the care and the guardianship of a child? Many stories that I've been hearing from either the previous administrations or this one is that parents who don't have someone within their family, a kin or a close person, are to name as an alternate guardian should they be deported, are naming people who are very loosely tied to them, coworkers, friends who they don't know very well, but they know have steady and clear status as citizens. And many of these folks are not familiar with all of the knowledge that immigrant communities are forced to have to know on how do we resource around having a new kid in our lives in this way. And so what I think is helpful about this is just getting the breadth of understanding for new parents, everything that DCYF offers families in its care that I can resource outside of DCYF. I'm trying to put in here as well as things like legal advice for kinship care, how to discuss trauma in our children is in this flyer and from a multitude of perspectives, including from NCTSN, which is like a national resource around trauma impacting children, as well as the really good resource, Knowing Your Child. I don't know who's behind this, but it's fantastic. It's a state resource for how to support your family. And any link that I go to at this time on how to resource my family at this time or one way or another takes me back to this. And I'm so excited by that. In an advocacy perspective, it's really effective. I don't know who made it, but thank you. if you did. The connection to community and family, this is really critical, and I think one that I'd appreciate more resources in, which is about connecting to the culture of your family. If you yourself are not from that culture, how do you support your child staying connected to that, which is a key element of their feeling healthy and less impacted by this trauma. And then some general resources on trauma, sensory needs, and trauma responses. And last, these Help Me Grow Washington and other kind of resources for basic needs that I'm trying to put in. And so I wanted to show this last. I know we don't have a ton of time, but this is the thing that we're working on now, and the final resource if you have considerations around what might be useful for that. I'm going to stop talking. There's a lot to kind of review on what we've been working on, and it can go in many directions. So thank you for the recommendation on language, Senator Wilson, and I'm going to try to stop talking to see if there's any questions, concerns, or reflections on the work.
So we have about 1 minute or less. Anybody have a real quick question? If not, I will have the pleasure.
I just want to say great work, and under extraordinarily difficult circumstances and no money. I'm very proud of the state of Washington and proud of you.
Thank you. And I just want to note that the last few months of the work are really about how do we set the next steps up for success. We are reaching close to 1 year under this federal administration, and there's already been a lot. How do we set this up? Because it is going to end in January, this rapid response team. It is looking like it will be outside of DCYF, which I think is to its benefit. We, I think, have done a robust policy review of impact to children and families. How does the scope change? Who takes on this work in this task force? That discussion is going to be vital. And I think as leaders, definitely one to tune into. Grace Huang out of the governor's office is going to be really leading that discussion. So if you have a relationship with Grace, or you want to get tapped into what is the next step of our response to federal changes, that is really, I think, a ripe opportunity for leadership to engage and to talk about. I would say one of the biggest needs is how do we create a working relationship between community partners and the state ongoing, because there are already things that we can't do that we know are needed. And how do we do this together and coordinate across systems? So that's my last plug. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lillian. We really appreciate the important work that you're doing and the fact that you took some time to come to the board and you got rescheduled a couple times. So we appreciate your flexibility with that as well. So thank you. And we're going to go ahead on to our public comment portion of the afternoon. And we are trialing this, by the way, at the end of the meeting so that all you public commenters can hear what else the meeting had to say before you make your public comment. Let us know if you like that or if you prefer it earlier. We'd be happy to hear your thoughts on that. So I'm going to start with our typical board public comment statement. So the DCYF Oversight Board operates under state law, which outlines its authority and responsibilities. Specifically, the board is responsible for monitoring DCYF's progress towards achieving outcome measures, ensuring DCYF's compliance with applicable laws and policies, overseeing DCYF's performance and policies, and offering advice and input to DCYF, the legislature, and the governor. While the board may consider information brought to its attention as part of its general oversight and monitoring role, it does not have the authority to investigate, direct, or alter DCYF decisions in individual cases. Additionally, during public comment periods, neither the board nor meeting presenters can respond to comments beyond a simple acknowledgement. All public comments related to DCYF will be compiled and sent to DCYF leadership following the board meeting. I wanted to reiterate that point that we will always collate the comments and we send those on to a contact at DCYF, so they are getting over to DCYF, the agency. To respect individuals who have sensitive stories to share or wish to discuss details of individual cases, we'd like to remind you that the board is subject to the Open Public Meetings Act. This means that our meetings are open to the public, recorded, posted on the Oversight Board's website, and live streamed on TVW. Written public comments submitted in advance were sent to the board members, and we had one of those this month. As of Friday afternoon, 12 or 10 people were signed up to speak, and that's what I believe we still have. To help ensure everyone has an opportunity to participate, please keep your comments to 2 minutes. We'll be testing a new online timer, which you'll see while you're speaking. So thank you all for all of these comments, and we're going to start with Ashley Elzia, and please feel free to correct the pronunciation of your name if I've said it incorrectly. Ashley.
Hi, Diane. This is Nicholas. I'm not seeing that name currently, but I will keep an eye out and let you know if it pops up.
Okay, thank you. How about Christina from Keeping Kids Safe? Are you with us, Christina?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
In light of today's discussion about the Oversight Board taking stronger action to hold DCYF accountable, I'm asking for an investigation into the child fatality data. On June 25th, an article was released reporting 7 child fatalities and 20 near fatalities. That article stated fatalities had nearly tripled, a 300% increase compared to the previous year. Yet a short time later at the July Oversight Board meeting, these numbers changed. Suddenly, it was reported as 4 fatalities and 18 near fatalities, reducing the increase to only a 200%. According to Vicky Ibarra from DCYF, this was presented as good news. I am formally requesting an investigation into this alteration of the reported fatality data. These numbers were clearly available, yet they were changed between public release and the Oversight Board meeting. That should alarm every single person in this room. It raises serious concerns about transparency, accuracy, and accountability. I am aware of more than 4 fatalities in the first quarter alone where there was CPS involvement. In addition, quarterly reports have not been published in a timely manner for the past 2 years. This delay lines up directly with the implementation of HB 1227 in 2023. Historically, these reports were released the month after the quarter closed. At the July meeting, it was evident that Patrick Dow already had the second quarter data. The data exists, yet it is not being made public. The question we must all be asking is what is being hidden and why? The data, the quarterly reports are a year behind. Now, regarding stakeholder engagement, I want to acknowledge I'm glad there was a foster care panel today. I am frustrated because I had made a suggestion to use the 1624 reps that represent the whole region. And that would bring a diversity and fairness. Once again, the East Side was left out. It was left out during the foster care panel. It was left out during the homelessness and housing discussion as well. This repeated exclusion is
I'm
unacceptable.
afraid you're at time.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Sarah Akey.
Hi,
I see you, Sarah. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm speaking today to express how frustrated I am with where we are with our child welfare system. When we fail to acknowledge limitations of parent capabilities due to cognitive, developmental, psychological, or other factors, we're jeopardizing the lives of children. The answer cannot always be services as much as we would like it to be. Sometimes these conditions are not treatable. We want parents to have the chance to parent, but not at the expense of a child's right to be safe, secure, and nurtured. Sometimes the best services that we have cannot adequately address parental deficiencies or acknowledge that sometimes parents are not ready to heal or recover. When we put our blinders on ignoring this, we rob children of their childhood and dangle their lives in the balance. 2 children identified in fatality reports from 2023 as VR and SR died when the father killed their mother and burned the home that they lived in as a part of a homicide-suicide. The father had known mental health illness, substance abuse problems, and had already tried to barricade the home to set it on fire once before. 7-year-old MTJ died as a result of non-accidental trauma injuries. This child had already lost their 7-month-old sibling, who died of an undetermined manner of death due to external factors. This family had a long-standing history of domestic violence, homelessness, and even left the state with the children during a visit. MTJ never got to experience a normal childhood. The chaos, violence, intakes, and open services lasted their entire life. Another child who is medically complex due to a neurologic condition is currently in the process of progressing towards a return home to parents who have demonstrated an inability to safely parent the child due to their own developmental and cognitive delays. The parents' conditions are expected to continue to progress and further impair their ability to parent, yet the department continues to take a chance with this child's life. My point in sharing these stories with you today is to point out the reality of our child welfare system. We have to be willing to acknowledge that sometimes parents cannot or will not make the right choice for their children. And when that occurs, we have to prioritize the safety and well-being of children and keep them safe. I ask the committee today to carefully consider their own loved ones. Is this what you would want for them? And then for the committee to ask themselves, what do they do to change this for the better?
Thank you so much, Sarah. We appreciate your comment. Our next public commenter is Sherry DePaulo. Let's see, Sherry, are you? There you are. Go ahead when you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sherry DePaulo. I am now a maternal mental health therapist, and I serve Stevens Ferry and North Pend Oreille counties. I am a former DCYF employee, and I left the agency in 2019 after 4.5 years. I left the agency because I was advised by my supervisor at the time that DCYF was reactive, not proactive, when I was attempting to place an 8-month-old child with healthy family out of state. And I was accused of preempting the parents' ability to reunify. But when you point out that I am placing the child with healthy, strong family and that the parents are lacking in the capacity and the ability to engage in services and attend visitations and such. In any case, I left the agency. I then reached out to Tom Dent and had a healthy conversation with him. And I have since gotten my master's so that I can be on the prevention and intervention side of the board. What Christina Johnson said about the East Side being left out is 100% true. We do not get recognized with the same needs and capacity in our areas. And those of us who are prevention and intervention providers are not recognized. In my capacity in maternal mental health, I serve maternal child health services, which means I provide case management for high-risk maternal care needs and special needs pediatric services, in the sense that all of these services are in Spokane, an hour plus south of us. So I engage a lot in community navigation of these services. But my concern comes in the HB 1227 Keeping Families Together Act. When we do see, like Sarah said, families being put back together that may not really come to the space of being appropriately reunified. It's about walking alongside that parent and letting them make the choice for their child and themselves. I had 13 reunifications successful, 9 family-to-family adoptions, and that's where I walked alongside those parents. And they were the ones that came to me and said, I cannot get my beans together. Would you please let my mother, my sister, my family member adopt my child and get them out of the care system? And I also come to you as a successful foster child twice in my own life, which I am still in contact with all of my foster families in Kansas and my social worker. So here I am on the prevention and intervention side of the table, attempting to reduce mortality and morbidity of infant maternal care cases. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry. We appreciate your comment today. The next is Kendria Ray.
Hi, Diane. I'm not seeing that name either.
Okay. Then we will move on to Kathy Elkins. Kathy?
Thank you. Esteemed members of the Oversight Committee, my background includes years of protecting children. I began performing puppet shows in Pierce County elementary schools, teaching young children to recognize and report abuse. Then as a teacher and school administrator, I filed and reviewed child abuse reports and supervised hundreds of student injury investigations, some leading to criminal charges, while ensuring accurate, fair documentation for law enforcement, much more thorough than DCYF. I have talked with dozens of families falsely accused of abuse since then. Their stories are tragically consistent. Witnesses never interviewed her, and families' explanations dismissed as implausible without explanation. Falsifying parent words, racist comments, threats, and enormous barriers to obtaining legal help or a second opinion. In 2021, in the lead up to a MedCon presentation, this committee submitted great questions in advance, yet the DCYF response was unbelievably apathetic and negligent. Washington MedCon providers routinely ignore AAP recommendations. Their reckless, incompetent opinions flood the system with false allegations over minor injuries, claiming predictive abuse. The CAPS widely use a 10-4 FACES screening tool, which was built on a disturbing premise. Its lead author, Dr. Mary Clyde Pierce, states under statistical analysis, to optimize the sensitivity of the refined rule, we define the cost of a false negative prediction as 20 to 1 relative to a false positive prediction. This means for every one missed case of abuse, they believe it is acceptable to balance it out with 20 falsely accused innocent families. Most of them have no history of abuse, no history of any criminal activity, and no substance abuse. And in Washington, where MedCon providers are out of control, this ratio is likely even higher. MedCon providers deflect responsibility, saying, we don't control what DCYF does. The problem is DCYF's failure, not HB 2027. It is a good law. Read it again. We are weaponizing CAPS to take away children from families.
Thank
I
you,
view their actions.
Kathy. You're at time. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. No worries.
Okay, our next one is Angela Kramer. Go ahead, Angela. I see you on there.
Hi, my name is Angela Kramer, and I am the owner of a statewide visitation agency with more than 17 years of experience in this field. I was also born addicted to cocaine and heroin and was CPS involved as a child. Like many at DCYF, I went into this line of work to make a meaningful difference in children's lives. DCYF is limited by the courts, and the courts are bound by the constraints of the current laws made by legislators. Too often, children's safety is sacrificed in favor of parents' rights. Parents have a voice, and so they are listened to, but who is there to speak for the children? There was a time when prevention was prioritized, removing infants born with drugs in their system until stability could be assured, or stepping in to address neglect before it escalated to imminent danger. Domestic violence was recognized as a true safety concern. Shockingly, we now hold higher standards of care for animals than for children. Animals are removed from owners for cruelty, neglect, and abandonment, yet we fail to extend that same basic protection to children. Our mission should be to prevent tragedies before they happen, not simply to respond to the aftermath. Behind every number in a report is a child who never got the chance to grow up or who experienced profound abuse and trauma that will follow them for the rest of their lives. Today, vulnerable children are forced to return to abusive environments. Would we ever ask a victim of rape to repeatedly or permanently spend time with their perpetrator? And yet we expect children who may love their parents simply because they know no different to endure ongoing pain, abuse, neglect, and exploitation. No child should remain in the care of a parent so impaired by substance abuse that they are incapable of caring for themselves, let alone a child. This last year, we've had heartbreaking cases. A 7-month-old in Yakima who starved to death as DCYF watched, a 5-year-old taped to a toilet, beaten and tortured to death for 6 hours in Federal Way, and countless infants born addicted who returned to unsafe homes, only to suffer significant physical abuse at only a few weeks or months old. Over 800 children have required Narcan this year. So
sorry, Angela, I'm afraid you're at time, but we do appreciate you coming in and giving your comments today. Our next one is Jamie Williams. Go ahead, Jamie. I see you up there.
There we go. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we gotcha.
All right. Hi, everyone. At the July meeting, much of the discussion centered around the disturbing rise in child deaths and near deaths in the state. And today I really want to shift the focus to the children who are still alive and living in these trapped and dangerous environments under House Bill 1227. I do serve on the school board in my district, and I want to share with you a letter that was written to me from an elementary school counselor. And she writes, I'm expressing how House Bill 1227 is harming families, children, and communities. Before the Keeping Families Together Act went into effect, I felt the system was striking a delicate balance, providing support to parents while also protecting the children out of home through out-of-home placements as necessary. However, with the passage of House Bill 1227, the balance has collapsed, and I've lost faith in the system's ability to keep children safe. I've reported elementary school students showing up at school high on drugs. In each case, social workers were ultimately powerless due to House Bill 1227. The children stayed in their homes and the cycle continued. And I just think that that's such an important letter to share. And it's really just one of many that I've received from mandated reporters who feel their hands are tied, watching children suffer while they can do nothing. And last year alone, you look at the data, over 130,000 intake calls were made, and 70% of those were screened out because they didn't meet the threshold under imminent physical harm. We really need to confront the reality of this situation. 1227 has not only failed our most vulnerable children, it's also placed an unbearable burden on those who are trying to protect them, like teachers, nurses, law enforcement, counselors, and other mandatory reporters who are on the front lines and seeing this trauma play out in real time. The ripple effect of this legislation is being felt in our classrooms, in our hospitals, and in the daily lives of children who are scared and neglected. Educators are exhausted, mandated. Okay, is that my time?
That is your time. Sorry.
Right.
We appreciate you coming in, though.
Dang it.
All right. Next is Ann Dalton. Go ahead, Ann. I see you.
Hi, I live and work in the Snohomish County area. I've worked for various nonprofits over my career. However, I consistently worked with parents with substance issues during the entire time frame. Over the last several months, I've begun to engage in open dialogue with many groups after having come to the realization that the situation isn't getting better. Instead, it's actually getting worse. Some say alarmingly so. I don't dispute some wording change needs to be reflected when addressing the safety of children in HB 1227. I will, however, challenge the Oversight Committee, as I've done so with many others and will continue to do so, to also factually address the true issue at hand. Full accountability for not just the legal wording used in a bill, but legal accountability for a department that has fallen through on its own promises and responsibilities time after time. Some examples would be that every social worker in the department is supposed to be trained in motivational interviewing. That hasn't happened, and it's not hard. Trainings are available online. The department is supposed to perform in a uniform manner. That's why they have so many manuals. Why then do so many offices, I can think of two off the top of my head, and quite honestly, I can bet that numerous of you thought instantly of the same two, have higher than average pickup rates, higher than average guardianship or adoption rates. If your department is indeed being held accountable, then why is OC's social worker still actively working cases after having that poor child's parents being identified as threats and the child is missing, presumed dead, and has been for years? Mr. Dowd implied in the last meeting that there was a lack of trust for the department amongst clients. Well, also foster parents, to be honest. Having worked multiple sides of the DCYF system, I can assure you, neither clients, kids, foster parents trust the system.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann. I appreciate you coming in and giving your comment today. And we have one last public speaker, Tara Harris. Tara, I see you. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Brent, Kendra, and Jack have all shared the struggles we face every day, but I need to be clear. Foster families like mine are not being heard by DCYF. DCYF is not communicating, and the truth is there simply aren't enough people to support our children. What hasn't been talked about enough is the drugs. Fentanyl is destroying families, destroying parents, and destroying children. I've lived with this with my own family. My foster nephew Blake has already been through more in his young life than most adults can imagine. 4 doses of Narcan this month alone. He's been traumatized, shuffled from place to place, and each time he comes back, he's a different child, hurting, scared, struggling to feel safe. DCYF has a choice to protect these kids. And while this crisis grows, DCYF is tied up by House Bill 1227, a law that is failing our kids. It's keeping children in unsafe homes when what they need most is stability and protection. Every child, every family is different, but what we all want is the same, for our children to be safe. They are the ones paying the price for a broken system and a drug epidemic that no one seems willing to truly confront. We cannot stand by while fentanyl and failed policies decide the future of our kids. Blake and every child like him deserve better. They deserve to be safe. To be clear, DCYF is fostering children to be reunited with active drug users. DCYF is forcing children to have visits with active addicts. To protect our kids, DCYF needs to hold these parents as accountable as us foster parents. Why would we need to Narcan a 2-year-old? Why are we not doing better for our families and for these children? Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and giving your comment, Tara. In fact, thank you all for your public comments. We do listen to your comments. Wait, we got Representative Dent. What are you commenting? Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I'm just curious, I know that there's some folks that thought they were going to comment today, and I've been hearing from them as I sit here listening to the other comments. And how are we doing that? Maybe it's a good time to talk about those we choose to comment, or how they're available, or how they're allowed to.
So the public comment is signed up, and I can let Elisha talk about this a little bit, but they have to sign up in advance, but they can sign up until the day of and up until a certain time when it's cut off. So we did have 10 sign up in advance. I don't think they're screened out. We just take everybody that comes in.
We also left open space in case there were individuals who came also in person, I do believe, today.
We sure did. And we had 100% of those who signed up on the list today. But I can absolutely follow up with the protocol, just so there's clarity.
Thank you, Elisha. Appreciate that. Thank you all.
And I will also reiterate for the public that there always is the ability to submit a written comment as well, if you prefer that. And those are always sent out to the board ahead of time. We get a chance to look at them. Okay, I'm going to turn it back. This has been an exceptional meeting. I'm going to turn it back to Senator Wilson to close us out.
Thanks so much. It's been a full morning and afternoon. We're at afternoon already, and I just really want to thank everyone for coming today to the Oversight Board meeting. It was clearly a full meeting, but I think we had an opportunity to hear some data-driven information and really some highlighting of important work that's going on underway at DCYF that will help us, I think, better understand not only what they're doing, but what more they may need to do and what support that might mean from what we could do as Oversight Board members. And also really understanding some of the significant challenges that they're facing and that we all are facing right now, especially as we look at the needs for infants and children and young adults and youth and families across the state. So with that, I just want to say, remind y'all, our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, October 29th, from 9 to 5. It's a full day meeting, and the hope is that you will join us in person in Olympia if you're able to do that. It will be the first time we've been together in person, I think, since our last time, which was our retreat. And since then, we do have new members, and it's always a different experience to actually be able to sit with friends and have conversations rather than looking at a 1-inch square on Zoom and hoping that you are getting a chance to meet folks. So unless there is, oh, I see Senator Christian's got his hand up. Hi.
Thank you, Senator Wilson. Have we chosen a location for that October meeting?
That is a great question. It is on Capitol campus, and we're still figuring out the room, but we do put the location on our website. And of course, I'll be in contact with all Oversight Board members. So just wanted to let you know, but it is on Capitol campus.
Perfect. All right. Any other things for the good of the order? And the Seahawks slam dunk win yesterday. I'll just say go Hawks. But other than that, it's great to see everyone. Judge Emamilo, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you having you in the room and with other board members as well. So deepest appreciation. Again, if you've got any input that's come to your mind related to the Oversight Board 2.0, please feel free to jot some things down and send them to Lisha. They can just be thoughts. They don't have to be any kind of essay or anything else, but would love to make sure we're including all people's hearts and minds as we move forward as a board. So with that, Co-Chair Levy, anything else on your mind?
Nope, just thank you all for being so attentive, and it was a busy schedule. We appreciate your presence.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Nicholas, always, and Lisha as well. Have a great afternoon all.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.